Hey everybody, welcome back to Strong Like Bull, the podcast that explores all kinds of different ways to becoming an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur or simply just crushing it in your career. I'm your host, Zach Brown, and today we are joined by the incredible Skylar Romines. You guys might know her from X or LinkedIn. At Skylar Romines, or may have read her book before, so she did. We put a link to this in the description of this video, so click on it and get your own copy. But it's an awesome read. It's full of interviews of female founders, CEOs, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and it was a very interesting read, being a father of a beautiful little girl. So recommend you pick it up. But in today's episode, we're going to go over the three things that we go over in every Strong Like Bull episode. One, the origin story. So we're going to figure out what in Skylar's past made her tick and made her what was that spark that really gave her the entrepreneurial mentality. Two, the jump. What possessed her to actually go all in and start her own company. And then third, the specialty spotlight, or the lesson where she tries to teach me something new. So we're going to pull back the curtain, get a peek behind there, and try to uncover any sort of insider secrets, tips, tricks, and any actionable items that she could offer us. So I had an absolute blast recording this conversation, and I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as I did. So buckle in for another great episode filled with practical insights. This is Strong Like Bull, and it's time to learn from the one, the only, the unstoppable Skylar Romines. Let's go. All right, cool. So Skylar Romines, ATW Advisors. Welcome to Strong Like Bull. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Okay, so let's dig into your story. I'm very interested because to me, I mean this the most respectful way possible. I think you kind of popped out of nowhere for me on my radar.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool and something to be proud of, that, maybe you were doing your thing and it just weren't on my radar, but all of a sudden it's like a waterfall of Skylar Romines, all over LinkedIn. You wrote a book and you started a company, and I feel like all this has been really, really rapid. So I'm really interested to see where you came from. And so how it works is you start with your earliest memory and then tell me how you got here today.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of business or anything like that, I think my earliest memory is definitely when I was 15, I launched kind of my first business, so to speak. I started kind of babysitting and tutoring, and that morphed into kind of this SAT prep tutoring company that actually ended up growing, and I ended up having about 30 employees at some point. So that was kind of totally unexpected, but ended up working out. And I think that kind of entrepreneurial itch has always been there. I think a lot of it is probably nature as much as it is nurture, right? I think it's probably a combination of, I had parents growing up that were kind of doing their own thing. My dad was obsessed and kind of addicted with work. And my mom was kind of with her friends and kind of doing her own thing. And I was an only child. So I was very hyper independent from the time I was little. I think I just always kind of had this drive to if someone tells me to do something one way, I want to see if there's a better way to do it. And so I think a lot of what I do in life still kind of comes from that place. I'm not a rebel without a cause, but I'm happy to be a rebel with a cause, if that makes sense. So if you want to tell me that I need to do this thing and I'm happy to do it, but you tell me that I need to do it this way and there's clearly a better way to do it, I'm going to do it the better way. Right. And I think that's just hardwiring. I've always been that way from the day I was born.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm definitely against the grain, or anti-traditional, or whatever, right? I'm a thinker. So I don't want to say figure it out, because that seems like a slower way to do it, but I do want to understand it instead of just blindly following direction.
Well, I mean, it's crazy if you just think about the fact that being a quote unquote thinker is against the grain now, right?
Definitely
that
is.
should be the norm. But yeah, I mean, to your point, sometimes slowing down helps you speed up. So thinking about a new process or a new way to do something might seem like it's slower in the short term. It may be, slower on a short time scale, but on a medium or long time scale, it might save you a ton of time and energy and resources, right? So I feel like it's worth it more often than not.
So 15, you started a business. What was the business?
It was babysitting and tutor. So it started off babysitting. And then I just had so many clients I couldn't do. I was babysitting and tutoring. So I started like bringing in kids from school and helping them like make money. And I was just taking a cut of it, right? So I was kind of having a business then without
For
having
sure.
any official business. And then it expanded to what I realized is, I was going to high school in Irvine. There's a really heavy Asian community there. And those parents put a really heavy premium on the SAT scores that their kids got. And I got basically a perfect SAT score. So it was like, I can charge these people, at 15, 16, or I guess 16, 17, kind of at that point seemed like an insane amount of money just to come over and kind of tutor their kids on how to pass the SAT. And then once again, I had too many clients for me to do it, just kind of built it up and built it up. And eventually there were about 30 people who were on the payroll. So
Irvine, safest city in America.
safest
Or
city
it
in
was at
America.
one
That's what
point.
they say.
I think so. A few years ago, I think something happened, some sort of, violent crime. I don't know, it was a
Yeah.
robbery or something, and it knocked him out of that first position.
Well, it's
But
kind of a skewed statistic anyway, because it's the safest large city in America, which is like 1 million people or more. So there aren't that many large cities. And then the way that not to like drill down on this too much, for some reason I went down a rabbit hole one day, but the way that they define the violent crime statistics kind of skews the outcome as well. But whatever, we'll take it. We're the safest.
so what kind of kid were you? If say I went and interviewed, like the parents of other kids in your
Yeah.
elementary school or middle school, would they say, Skylar, stay away from Skylar? Or was it, hey, you should invite Skylar over for a
Oh no,
sleepover?
they loved me. I was a weird kid for sure. Like I was always a very deep kid. I think I was like an old soul. I used to hang out with like my grandma and her friends, and they would call me the wise old man. Like I never felt like a kid. Like my mom will always tell me when I was like really young, 3 or 4, I would stand around the playground and like the other kids would be playing. She would try to encourage me, go play with them. And I would go, but they're gross. Like they're eating
Yeah.
sand. They're like doing all these things I have no interest in doing.
You wanted to play bingo and
I wanted to like play chess. Yeah. I was like, this is like repulsive to me. Like, what are they doing? It makes no sense, And I think that kind of stuck with me. Like, I was just always weird. I never kind of thought the way that other people thought. And for a long time, I really it really impacted my self-esteem, right? Because it was like, I'm not like everyone else. And for a long time, especially as a kid, that's really hard, right? Because even around other like quote unquote smart kids, or like in these like special school programs or whatever, like I just felt weird. And then as I got older, I realized like you can think a certain way, but also learn how to adapt and kind of get along with other people. And you're going to be much happier and have a better outcome, right? Because you may never find other people who think like you, but you can kind of adapt where you can still be yourself, but at the same time fit into society a little better, right? For lack of a better word. Yeah, I was definitely, I had friends. I was an only child, so my mom always did a really good job of like making sure that I had friends over and stuff. But I just always was like a kind of a standoffish, weird kid, and I was always in my head. I was journaling constantly. I found all these journals from when I was like 8, 9 years old, like ruminating about the concept of eternity and like what that means, right? Like that's not a normal 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
I'd
was
say that's advanced, not
a
weird.
unique kid. I don't even know if it's advanced. It's just weird, right? I was a unique kid for sure.
That's interesting because I can relate to that. And even when I was in college, you'd think that it's the time of your life. You're out partying or have, a ton of friends and all that. My best friend was my biology professor.
Okay.
And like, so he got me on a TV show and we went out snake hunting and we did controlled burns in fields. And like, I just did the coolest stuff with him. Yeah. And like, he was my best friend in college, which is weird. And he was like, I don't know, 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I feel like the traditional type of interest of people my age growing up I was never on the same wavelength
Yeah.
of that. Even today, I have trouble with some people I interact with on a regular basis. Like just the level of conversation really bothers me. Definitely doesn't interest me, and even does the opposite of intrigue me. I think it bothers me that you've been talking about the Grammys for the last 20 minutes. Like, do you seriously have nothing else to think about? Like, I couldn't even do that.
I think it comes down to like finding your people, right? And this is kind of like there's probably a bifurcated conversation here about like your personal versus professional life, because especially in sales, as you know, like you have to just really be good at relating to people. And so sometimes, yeah, you have to kind of fumble through those Grammy conversations. Or like one thing I would do early in my career, because, I was always working in very male dominated industries,
which I want to dig into.
commercial real estate and insurance. So a lot of like ex-sports guys, a lot of guys who played sports in college and things, and, sports fans. So one thing I would always do before a meeting, whether it was the client or, a colleague, was like, look up like, hey, like what big sports things happened, the last 48 hours or whatever, because there was a good chance I was going to walk into that room and that's what they were going to be talking about. And I at least wanted to like not sound like a complete, like I was completely out of the loop, right?
Super Bowl,
yeah,
right?
Like when is the Super Bowl? What teams played in it this year? No, I was always a Cowboys fan, so I always knew about football, but I know I'm plagued. But any other,
I'm a Colts fan. It's
an
worse.
early 90s kid, okay? Like I grew up in the Troy Aikman era. It was iconic, but now it's rough. But yeah, so I think just learning how to like meet people at their level is a very important skill. But for your own mental health and well-being, you also need to find your people who can meet you at your level, right? And then some people are going to be operating even on a higher playing field than you, and like it's nice for them to come visit you down at your level. It's always funny when you meet someone like that where you're like, well, you're much smarter than me. Like those are the people I love to be around.
That's why I was looking forward to this
Thank
interview.
you, but no.
And so that was always semi-clear to you?
No,
or was that a lesson learned or just something that you did naturally?
Definitely a lesson learned. I think as a kid, I knew I was weird. I didn't know why. And I didn't know how to relate to other people. And then, yeah, it definitely, so I got licensed as an insurance broker when I was 19, kind of putting myself through college. And, school was always really easy for me. I never needed to after the first semester of college, I never bought a book. I was like, this is fine. I'm going to get A's. I don't really need to deal with this, I can. And so I had a bunch of time. And so got licensed as a broker and kind of started on the service side and like actually learning insurance, which is kind of unusual because most people kind of go into sales or service and they're kind of pigeonholed there, right? But I think as I got older and kind of matured and progressed, like I was definitely a late bloomer in a lot of aspects of life, certainly in terms of like just like self-esteem and like social things were really difficult for me. Like I would say I was probably in my early to mid 20s before I like really started figuring out how to deal with other people, right? And then even more so, I had my kids when I was 25, 26. So that really throws you into the deep end of the pool in terms of like...
I was 18.
Okay. Wow. I didn't realize that. What was that like?
It was, I had to grow up really quick.
Yeah. I'm imagining that wasn't the plan.
Definitely wasn't planned. Yeah, I'm not Mormon or anything.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, but...
Yeah. I mean, it was, it was a college thing, my first year in college, like my first semester in college. And so and I played baseball in college. That's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And then, but now I need a job that pays money, actually. Oh, I used to work construction at nights. And so I'd work construction at nights and then leave work, go to the gym to shower for school. And then after school, have practice or whatever. And then get like a 2 to 4 hour nap and some sort of quick, granola bar or something before I had to go into work again. So now, it was tough, but it was good. Like I wouldn't have changed anything. And now when something doesn't go my way, like, okay.
It's so much easier.
It could be tougher.
Yeah. You can probably relate to, I have that thing too, where like people will take these problems that to me, like wouldn't even register as a problem. And they kind of blow it up to a point where like it consumes them almost. And like, that wouldn't even have hit my radar as something that I needed to be worried about. Like, that's the kind of thing you just solve and move on from, right? So I do think definitely like, look, some of the things I went through, especially when I was younger, I always say like, I wouldn't wish on anyone, but at the same time, I wouldn't unwish them on me because that's made me who I am, right?
For sure.
And I don't know that you can build a certain level of resilience without going through really hard things.
So many great lessons in hard times. And what I struggle with, and I ask this question a lot to my friends and business partners, and what I struggle with is being able to teach my kids those lessons without making their life tough, because what I do every day or why I do every day directly contradicts what I try to teach my kids, right? I work my ass off to make sure my kids never have to go through the hard times that, I did. And then on the back end, they still need to get those lessons that you
Right.
get from going through those hard times. And I really struggle with trying to teach those. And when you have a prettier life, you know, creating tough times seems cruel almost sometimes, and like, I don't want to be reported to school because I took an iPad away for a week or, whatever. Like just the smallest things that wouldn't hit my radar if I was their age seem cruel and unusual.
How old are they?
At 17 and 5.
Oh, wow, you got a wide spread.
Yeah.
Um,
So I had my son when I was
right.
18, and then my daughter is 5.
So I have thoughts on this, but what have you come up with so far in having those conversations? What
The
are some of the best takeaways?
I think so. Here's the most unique thing that I've did is my wife made dinner one night. I forget what it was. Maybe I forget what it was. But my daughter was like, "Ooh, this is gross." And I was like, "Oh, hell no."
That's the older one or the younger
No,
one?
my daughter is 5. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, hell no." And I
Yeah.
was like, "All right, get in the car." And so we got in the car. We drove to Home Depot,
Okay.
and I got a block of wood, and I bought her a little hatchet. And so we brought it home, and we went in the backyard, and I made her chop her own firewood.
Okay.
And I helped her, obviously. I don't give hatchets to 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
In trouble.
Not on camera for sure.
But, I helped her chop her own wood, and then she had to build her own fire, and then she had to cook hot dogs for the entire week. I'm like, okay, you have to make your own stuff if you're not going to be at least appreciative and polite of somebody that went out of their way to cook you a meal, then you're going to have to do it yourself. And so I think it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday she did it. And, but she never complained again after that. So it was effective. I don't think it was cruel and unusual. I thought it was fun, actually.
It's kind of fun.
So that's the most unique way that I've done it, right? But I do struggle with the others, just in general, other stuff. I guess I can't really think of any examples, but when something challenging does enter their life, how are they going to react? And my gut is that they're not going to react well.
Yeah. I heard someone say at some point, I can't recall who it was, but they said like the hardest thing that's ever happened to you is the hardest thing that's ever happened to you. So whether that's like, you had abusive parents or you went to war or whatever, or your car got scratched because you've had a really soft life, right? It's still real to you. And I think there's something to that. But I also think like, I question this with my girls a lot. My girls are twins. They're 11 now, and they are like completely different people, which is so anything you do, however your kids turn out, just know that parenting is only a percentage of the outcome because they've been different from the day they were born and they're twins, right? I mean, completely different. And it's really interesting to see kind of just how, again, like the nature versus nurture thing, where one of them actually puts herself in situations like she loves competitive sports, she's coding, she's building games, she likes doing difficult things. She likes like hard work. They don't have like true homework at their school. It's kind of a funny thing, but they have like optional homework that they could do. And she like always wants to do the optional homework. And then she'll ask me if she can print out more difficult homework to do. And the other one, like she never crawled because she made people carry her until she could walk. And she would like crawl up in this little push car and make her sister push her around. Like if there's a way that she can get out of doing an assignment, she's going to get out of doing it. If she can find someone else to do it for her, she's going to find someone else to do it for her. She would have zero responsibility if that was the option, right? And it's funny that they're twins because then obviously the natural thing is for the one to always be doing the work of the other. And so I'm constantly having to go like, no, you both need to do your own thing and take care of yourselves. I don't know. I think there's a natural inclination for humans to like, hey, I went through this hard thing, so you guys should have to go through this hard thing too. But then as a parent, it's like, I don't want them to go through anything hard ever. And yeah, I think it's tough to strike that balance. I think there's probably along the way things that you can do to like build that resilience. But the reality of the situation is they're always going to have a safety net that you didn't have, right? Because they're always going to have you and your wife as a backstop, and same with me, right? But maybe that's okay. Like maybe they don't need to ever know that true sink or swim feeling to build some level of responsibility and resilience. I wonder with things like, because I have some friends who have kids now who are like entering the workforce, and they'll come to you and say like, hey, can you help get Jake a job or whatever, and it's like, well, yeah, I could. But like, you have to make Jake call me. That's one of my big things is like, I'll buy the Girl Scout cookies from your kid, but she has to knock on the door, not you. Like, I'll help your kid get a job, assuming that they're actually going to do the job, right? but they need to make the calls, they need to make the emails, like they need to show that they're willing to put some kind of effort in, not just like, hey, my mom's friend's going to call and put me in this position,
Yeah.
right?
And for a rude awakening, once they start working here, I'm not going to do the job for them.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people from the best, intended place do things like that for their kids. And then the kids show up and they're like, what is this? I've never had to actually work before. Like, you're not just going to pay me to be here. So I don't know. I'm sure that there's a balance there that I haven't quite figured out yet, but
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so why insurance? So you said you got licensed at 19.
I got
I feel
licensed at
like
19.
the only thing I knew, so I got an insurance when I was 25.
Okay.
And from 19 to 30, all I knew about insurance was that I had it on my car.
Yeah.
Even though I was selling it for 5 years, I still
Didn't know anything about it.
Like, here are my talking points.
Yeah. So I was, my aunt is in premium financing.
Okay.
And she, is pretty high up at one of the bigger premium financing companies. You would know the name, I'm not going to say it here, but going back to helping your kids and family members get jobs. But I was working at Nordstrom at the time, and I was like, I need to do like something different, right? I was putting myself through school, but again, I really wasn't going to school that much because I just didn't really need to. And she was like, well, why don't you go work for one of these insurance brokers that I work with? And so I thought, okay, I'm folding clothes until midnight some days. Like this is, I was actually making decent money at Nordstrom because I was like top salesperson in the department pretty quickly. But I was like, I just don't, it's the hours, it's the folding the clothes, it's the doing this and that. And I was like, yeah, I don't know anything, but I'll go talk to someone. I went to 3 places. One thing my aunt always taught me was always have 3 offers before you accept a job.
Okay.
So it started here, right? Went to 3 different places and talked to 3 different people. There was one lady, Joan, who was probably my first like true mentor. And she had a reputation in the industry for just being absolutely hellish to work with. Like Anna Wintour in the fashion industry is Joan of insurance. Like she was just supposed to be the toughest lady. And she would ride your ass. Like she was not easy on you. But I think I learned so much that first 6 or 7 years because Joan was so tough on me. Like I definitely, even though there's no direct line, I know for a fact I wouldn't have gotten as far in the insurance industry as I had today if I hadn't chosen to work for Joan then, But I remember my first interview, she said, what do you know about insurance? And I said, absolutely nothing. I have like renter's insurance because I was renting a condo at the time, and I have like my car insurance, And she goes, well, do you know how to use Excel? Because she was older. She was probably, in her 60s. When I started in insurance, I had a typewriter on the edge of my desk because Joan still was using a typewriter. But I go, yeah, I can use Excel. And she goes, well, how good are you at it? And I go, not very good, but I'll go home tonight and I'll, be better tomorrow. And I guess she liked that answer. So she was like, okay. I was like, I can, whatever you want me to do, I can do it by tomorrow.
It shows that you have a figure it out about you, which I consistently say is the number one characteristic of anybody to be successful, whether you're an entrepreneur, a salesperson, entrepreneur, anything. If you have a figure it out about you, that's the one ingredient that like will never steer you wrong.
I agree. The one thing I look for, I call it HAH. So high agency humans.
Not ADD.
Not ADD. We got that too. We got a lot of acronyms in this room, but no. So high agency humans are like the number one indicator for me that someone's going to be successful regardless of what they choose to do.
High agency humans.
Yeah.
Interesting.
People who will figure it out, right? People who something goes wrong, they're going to solve the problem, versus this mentality, I think, especially for, employees of other people, where it's like, there's always someone within a company that you can pick up the phone and call and go, hey, how do I do this? And I think early in your career, a lot of people don't realize that, like, if it's a problem that needs to be solved and you're calling someone else to solve it, you could have just as easily solved it, right? So instead, I see it.
That's you're describing my day to a T,
right?
Or you called me to Google it,
right? So that's actually one thing I do with my kids too. Is like if they ever come to me with a problem, I'm like, what are potential solutions? What have you tried? Did you try to fix it on your own? And one, the answer is always yes. The other one, the answer is always no, right? So that's the first thing is always like, go back and try on your own. Come back and tell me what you did and why it did or didn't work. And then if nothing worked, come up with like 2 or 3 ideas and let's see if one of those will work, right? Versus,
I think we're the exact same, but different. And I struggle doing that and being nice.
okay,
But we're saying the same thing.
right.
But I've always struggled being I guess empathetic. I don't know, or having a softer human resources type of
Approach.
approach. And it's always like, I'm a lion in the jungle. Like, dude, what have you tried?
Yeah.
Nothing. Like, why are you coming to me? Like, that would be my exact tone, probably.
Yeah.
Like, come on, dude, you're better than that.
Yeah. I mean, if it's been a lot, sometimes maybe it's a little more like, or if it's something ridiculous, right? Where I'm like, you didn't even try that. But yeah, I mean, I've just learned like the way my kids operate. I don't think that like, and I'm a firm believer in like tough love as needed. But I think on a
Well, I'm the king of
regular,
tough love.
right? And I think actually for adults or things like, I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are just like generally trying to better themselves, whether it's like their health or, their job or their marriage or whatever. For whatever reason, a lot of people come to me for advice. And my first thing that I say is always like, I don't know if I would go to myself for advice. So anything I'm about to say, take it or leave it. But I think, where was I going with? There was a point and I totally lost it.
We're at H.
HAH, high agency humans, and then we're with the kids. A lot of people thrive on tough love, whether they realize that or not. That's what they actually need, especially like our generation. A lot of people were raised, we're that kind of like quintessential participation trophy generation where nobody was ever told like you did this thing wrong or you could do this thing better or hey, you've gained some weight or, you got to be on this, but you maybe really shouldn't have gotten a B or like, yeah, you made this team, but you're the weakest person on the team. You need to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the, I don't even know what to call it, ignorance or arrogance. I don't know, but
Well, they kind of go hand in hand.
yeah. Well, I've had employees that, start working for us and maybe in college, and then they graduate and they come and they ask for a raise. I'm like,
Because you graduated?
for what? What does that have to do with, the marketing job that you have? Did you learn something new once they handed you the piece of paper? And I feel like that's maybe a too brutal of a rude awakening for people. But I mean, I've had people not be interested in working for us anymore because they felt entitled to that. And as a startup entrepreneur, like that's a delicate balance.
Right.
Like, hey, do I feed into, not rocking the boat too much? But, hey, maybe there's a middle ground. I can give you a little bonus because you graduated or whatever, right?
Right.
Which is totally against everything I stand for.
Right.
You got to earn everything.
We'll pay for you to go take some more courses somewhere. um, yeah, that's tough. I think one of the biggest kind of wake up calls that I had in my professional career, and I should have probably realized it sooner, but I wasn't connecting the dots on this for some, you would think like between the babysitting and tutoring and then being fully commission based at Nordstrom. When I started, in the insurance space, one of the things that didn't click for several years was like, if you want to make more money, be in a revenue generating position, period. But nobody really says that to
School
you.
doesn't teach you that,
Doesn't teach you that, right?
which is idiotic and criminal.
It really should. Because yeah, I mean, I kind of, to the credit of those people, right? In fairness, I think in my early 20s, I probably did similar things where I was like, I'm willing to work hard. Look, I'm not a sleeper. So I have a lot of hours in the day. I'm willing to work my ass off. But a lot of times it's poor leadership too. Not that I had poor leadership, but it's like, I don't even really know what to do. And a lot of bosses and leaders too kind of want you to do what's best to help them versus I think really good leaders are trying to also help you do what's best for you to, become the best version of yourself, which also then makes you more valuable to them in the long run, right? But that's not always the easiest path in the short term. But yeah, I wish someone had just sat me down in my early 20s and said, look, dummy, you make more money for the company, you're going to make more money, period. Get into a
It
revenue
seems
generating
obvious,
position.
but it's
Yeah,
not. It's not. When you're in the thick of things
right.
and you're worried about your career, like how do I get a promotion, a next raise, or more responsibility or whatever, you don't think like an entrepreneur. You don't think of like revenue
No,
generating. And it's funny, I just had this conversation maybe 10 days ago with one of our employees, and they're in the accounting department and already probably overpaid and interested in making more money. And I had to tell them that you're not going to make more money in the accounting department
right.
because, I mean, I could get somebody to do this for half of what I'm paying you. I could outsource it overseas or offshore for a fraction of that. And so I love you, but yeah, it just, the math doesn't make sense. And you could tell, like, like, or maybe a light bulb, like, shit, yeah, like, all right, I'm going to do whatever.
Well, and I think a lot of people are willing to do whatever. They just don't know the right metric to be looking at, right? Because they're thinking, well, gosh, I'm working all these hours, or, they're from their perception, they're working so hard, and maybe they are, but maybe you're working too hard at the wrong things. So maybe that's a more important conversation. It's like, you don't really need to work 12 hours a day every day. You need to be making more money for the company, and you can take a cut of it, right? You can do it in 2 hours a day. If you can do it in 2 hours, it doesn't really matter. And that was that whole perspective was another reason that I always struggled in corporate America, because for me, it was like, if I'm making more money, why does it matter if I'm in the office, out of the office, working into the day, working at night, hanging upside down in the closet like a bat? Like, what do you care as long as the revenue is coming in?
Yeah, as long as you're not costing me money.
And as long as I'm not doing anything insane, I'm not
Yeah, of
sexually
course.
harassing people. I'm
If
not like,
if you're
making a
paying for
fool of the
yourself,
company. Right.
as far as the numbers go, and you're not disruptive
Exactly.
to what we got going on, great.
But
Do it.
there
Do it.
there is kind of an attitude in corporate America that goes much further than that, where it's like we still want to have control over people. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, that was one of my biggest struggles.
Yeah, I had that struggle too when I was in that position.
Right.
I'm a little more understanding as an entrepreneur that you need to be protective of your business, especially with salespeople, because salespeople are the most likely to leave
Mhm.
and start their own thing. Example A, example B, right? That I would I hated golden handcuffs. It was the reason that, or one of several reasons that we left and started our own thing.
Yep.
And my whole thing was, I want to bring a bunch of salespeople in here and zero golden handcuffs. I am not fake. And if you don't want to be here, don't be here.
Yep. Yep.
And it has seemed like the right approach. And I think it was. But then as you grow, some revenue becomes, it comes from,
Revenue quality.
yes.
Yes.
I was about to say a new salesperson is like an earring, right? It's great. It's optional and it costs you money. Cornerstone accounts are like your liver. So you do want to protect that because it's vital to the business versus, an earring is not vital to your existence. So I have a little bit of understanding of where that came from now. I still hate it because I think your ultimate responsibility as an entrepreneur is to, you need to get people to stay. You need to treat them so well that they don't want to leave. And then if they do want to start their own thing, help them.
Right.
Maybe there's a team up or partnership or something that you can do. And I
Absolutely.
think that that's net positive in the universe that would come back tenfold.
When I left my last job, I was a little nervous, and I went into the managing partner's office and I was like, look, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to another brokerage. I'm not going to be competing. I'm going to launch a consulting firm. And, told him the truth, which was like, I need to work for myself. I need to not work for someone else. And I want my daughters to like look at their mom and be proud. And I think they'll be more, I'm already the insurance person, which is not cool. Dad's the firefighter. So he's always going to be the cool one, I'm never going to compete with that. But at least if I'm a business owner, like that's kind of fun. Right. And I didn't know what to expect. And his immediate response was like, do you want money? I'll invest in it. He goes, I don't even know what you're going to do. You don't even have to tell me, but I know you and anything you do is going to be successful. And he's like, let me know if I can back you in any way. And I was like, hey, thank God,
That's
because I
great.
have been sweating that conversation for days, but
Okay. So tell me about that. So what were the few days before you walked into that office like? Like what were some of your thoughts of, because I'm sure you had some doubt. I'm sure you had some hope. I'm sure
yeah.
you had some um, strategy and mapping out and trying to plan, at least trying to think one or two steps ahead. Like, how am I going to eat the next 3 months? How am I, or you had a support system with your family or,
So it's funny for someone who manages risk for a living, right? But my personal risk appetite is almost like it's off the charts, right? I would do anything. Now, look, we weren't in a position where like we were going to be homeless in 6 months if I didn't bring in any money, right? So, that has to be considered. Now, if it were just me and there were no kids involved, I would absolutely put myself in a position where I might be homeless in 6 months to make something work, right? That's
yeah,
just kind of the way that my brain
put
works.
yourself
I
in the
think
corner,
it's important to
you
bet
fight
on
better.
yourself. Absolutely. Like I can eat for 3 months, and if this company is off the ground, I'm screwed. But guess what? You're going to come out swinging and you're going to figure out a way to make the company work as long as it's a viable idea in the first place, right? And if not, when it's that or starvation and you still can't make it work, you probably need to work on another project. I kind of just,
Okay, hold on, back up.
yeah,
So it sounds like you had a mix of calculated risk because maybe you had a window of 6 months or
sure.
3 months, but then also this, you couldn't have prepped for this, but when you left, it was also cordial. And
It
so
was totally cordial.
say something went wrong.
And I didn't
Could you come
know.
back and ask for a job or,
Yeah,
that safety net that you earned by doing such a great job
17
with
years,
them? Right.
right? That was one of the conversations that made me just finally, because for the last couple of years, I've been going, God, I really think I need to just do my own thing, right? Um,
So did you try to manufacture that homeless type of mentality or even
so
situation?
not really, but I'll say this, even if you're not faced with like, yeah, I'm not going to be destitute if I don't make money for the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever, there is still a real stress that comes with like that first month or two where like money is going out and no money is coming in, right?
Preach.
And you're looking at it and you're like, when is the money going to? Now, luckily for me, the way that this worked out, I started thinking about it in April, and I was going to an event in late April, commercial real estate gala in New York. And somebody told me like, or I heard online or something like, hey, if you think you want to do your own thing, but you're not fully committed to it yet, like print some business cards with your new name and title, the company name, and just print them out and start handing them out to people and see how that feels and see if you want to do that. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. So in May, early May or whatever, I printed some cards,
2024.
2024, took them to that trip in New York, started passing them out to people, hadn't like registered the name or anything yet. Like it was literally, I printed some cards and got them rush delivered so they would be there the day before I left, right? And I was like, this feels right. And so I went back and, I planned on launching July 1, which was crazy because my book was coming out July 4. But we ended up signing 3 clients before July 1. So it ended up even, you know, revenue came in before the business was even set up. And so then this was a different set of issues, but I didn't have the issue that I was most concerned about initially, which was, am I going to have money flowing out and no money coming in, right? Because we got those 3 signed contracts in month 1, we had a 6-figure month before I had even figured out how to send an invoice, right? So then it was like, now I have a whole different set of issues, which is I don't have a system to set up. I was calling people like,
That figure it out came in handy, huh?
yeah, I was like, how do I like bill my clients for something? Because the one thing about working for corporate America is like you always have people in those functions, right? So like you would have an account manager who's doing your billing, and all of a sudden it was like everything's on me. Like I have clients telling me like, send me a DocuSign, and I'm like, I got to sign up for a DocuSign account, like send me an invoice. I'm like, I got to sign up for a QuickBooks account.
Well, I know you're still fairly young.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I meant your business. You too, but you're fairly green
Yes,
as an entrepreneur. So if you ever do need help with anything, please feel free to
thank
reach
you.
out to
I
me.
appreciate it.
I like being that resource
Thank you.
because when I was in your position, I needed that resource and didn't have it,
Yeah,
which is, again, pros and cons to that. But if something is of the essence to like, it's a sense of urgency that needs to get done, feel free to reach out to me. Even if
thank
I
you.
already have the resource, use it. Yeah,
Thank you.
instead of trying
Yeah.
to go sign up for your DocuSign, like I could have just let you use my thing until you figured out which service provider you wanted to use rather than I got to start with the elite
Well,
thing.
so
And
that would
then,
have been great because then it was like, I signed up for QuickBooks, everything. So now I've got this business banking with QuickBooks, which down the line is a nightmare. So now a few months in, I'm having to
right.
change all my banking over to something else because you can't cash a check that's over X amount and you can't do this and that. And it's
This is
like,
what I do. This is what I do. So as a
yeah,
private equity, our private equity company is more like venture capital, but this is what I do. I help people start businesses, whether they're ours or not, or we're involved in investing or not. This, I root for entrepreneurs. It's the reason for this podcast. It's the reason for every company that we have. It's the reason, I rented a car and drove all the way out here, from Indiana because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so please don't hesitate to reach out if you need help.
thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
in doing that, you'd be shocked at how many doors, how much opportunity comes about. If I know what you do, we have a very large customer base. We have a very large network. We have a very large presence in commercial insurance, mostly in the workers' comp space. And I'm sure you do too in your space. And like those overlaps or those opportunities just the light bulbs come on when you are involved like that,
Yeah, for
So
sure.
anyways, feel free
I
to
appreciate
reach
that.
out to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I will say I was lucky in that, I have quite a few friends who are business owners. So it would have been much more difficult if I didn't have those people to call. Right. And I was definitely calling them in like the week before I quit my job was probably the most hectic week. And it quickly flipped from I'm going to tell them I'll give them a month or two if they want it. Like I don't need to do 2 weeks. Right. But also then it flipped because I had these people who wanted to sign contracts and it was like, well, shit, now I've told them I'm going to give them a month. And
And
these clients lined up like
was your concern that there was going to be,
there was overlap
uh,
at the end.
well, yeah, but I mean, were you concerned that you weren't going to be able to do a good job for your customers
Well,
because you were
yeah, I
working
was like,
full time,
we don't
or
even
was
have
there
a
some sort of
company.
conflict?
Well, it's kind of weird when you're a commission salesperson because, like, yeah, I was still working full time, but what does that even look like? It was mostly me offboarding my clients onto another team,
Mhm.
making introductions and things like that. I mean, I certainly wasn't going out looking for new business at that point, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So,
Yeah, there was something with me whenever we did it that I didn't want to receive a paycheck from this company while working on this company. Like
yeah,
it feels
weird. I had the crossover of one paycheck after I had signed a client, and then I had like one final paycheck. And yeah, there's something about it that because I don't want to ever feel like I'm not giving my all to something. And so I didn't want, and that's why I was so upfront with them about it from the beginning,
yeah,
where it was
I
like,
respect that for sure.
I don't want to, this is what I need to do for me. And it's nothing to do with you guys. And I'm not launching a direct competitor. I'm actually doing something different in the space. So actually, we can be referral partners for each other
Yeah,
now. So
exactly.
it's kind of a win for everyone, right? Was kind of what I led with too. But um, yeah, you fumble your way through though. I mean, it's awesome to have people and a network and resources to rely on. Like I can't understate enough the importance of that. But it's also, if someone dropped you off naked in the middle of a jungle with no money and nothing, like
Great show.
certain
Naked
people
and
are
Afraid.
yeah, is that a real thing? I don't do
Naked and
TV.
Afraid. You never heard of that?
I just bought a TV like 2 weeks ago for the first time in 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So I've seen like no
It's a pretty old show. It's like
shows.
Survivor, but naked.
Okay. Yeah, no, no. So apparently this is nothing new, but that's what I always tell people. Like, I'm not impressed by like, I think a lot of people make a little bit of money and they start to lean on like these status symbols, the car or the watch or this and that. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that doesn't impress me. What impresses me is who you are like as a person, like your wherewithal. So if I took all of that armor away, because that's what it is, right? It's the women doing things to their face to look better. It's the men buying the watches. It's all the things like, if all of that armor was taken away and you better watch what wrist wear you're wearing around me. No, there's nothing wrong with doing those things, right? Especially if you've worked hard for your success. If that's important to you and you want to do it, go ahead. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying if all of that was taken away tomorrow, are you going to be able to rebuild? Because are you the type of person who can rebuild? And I think that is like it's a specific type of person with a specific skill set. Like the people I know who are most successful, if you took everything away from them and they started over again with nothing, they would be more successful than most people again in 5 years because
Do it
it's
again.
of just who they
Faster.
are. Right. Right. Yeah. They would do it faster because they already know what they know now.
Yeah. Yeah. Preach. Okay. Okay. So if you had to maybe pinpoint something in your experience that, hey, like if this didn't happen, I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. What do you think that would be? What would you chalk up your entrepreneurial attitude or mentality or opportunity or situation or like, hey, I'd still be working a job if I wasn't like this or if this didn't happen.
I think it always would have ended up this way. Like, I think it was just a matter of me finding the right timing and opportunity to kind of launch, right? Because the alternate was, and someone said this to me, and this was one of the things that finally made me do it was like, look, if there's a fear of leaving, which there was, because I'm making good money, I'm very comfortable at my job. I'm absolutely never going to lose my job, right? I could realistically not produce any more business ever and still make money probably until I retire, if not for, so it was like, but it's that golden handcuffs thing that you were talking about where it got to a point where I was like, what am I doing here and why? And I'm not happy and I don't like turning in an expense report to someone and I don't like being told what I can and can't do and I don't like being told to come back to the office and there's a theme here. I just don't like being told what to do. Like I get mad at my iPhone when it tells me to turn my earpods down. So I always tell people, I'm like, if you get mad at your iPhone when it tells you to turn the volume down, you might be an entrepreneur, right?
Have you ever taken a personality test?
I have. I got a degree in psychology and social behavior.
So whenever I was at Orion Risk Management,
Okay.
and he gave us like a McQuaig or something. I think it was
Okay.
McQuaig. And, and he gave us the results, and it's like, having to figure it out, whatever that was called, 10 out of 10, this category, 10 out of 10, this category, 10 out of 10. And then the last category, I got a 0. And it
Yeah.
was, I think it was works well with others and
Okay.
takes direction, or, easily managed type of thing. And he's like, okay, you don't like people telling you what to do. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, I don't.
So I worked in Dallas for several years with a captive group. You maybe
Active resources.
no, they're called ACAG, American Contractors Insurance Group. They're the longest running group captive in the world. I think they've been around for like 35 years. They work with publicly held contractors. Anyways, they had a professional or a executive psychologist or whatever they called her, who was there, and she would meet with everyone and kind of put you through the most intensive personality test that I've ever taken in my life. And there were like 100 metrics where you scored 1 to 100. And the constant joke there was mine said I'm 99% outgoing and 37% friendly. And I was like, what does that mean? Because it kind of sounds the same to me,
Yeah.
I said, and it kind of sounds bad. And she goes, no. Outgoing is like, how extroverted you are and how well you're able to get along with other people. She said, you're never going to have a problem like walking into a room, talking to people, things like that. And I go, okay, but why am I only 37% friendly? And she goes, that's actually a misnomer. It's a metric of how willing you are to lie or sugarcoat things just to make people happy. So
Oh, I'd
you,
be a 0.
right? So I was like, yeah, that's totally my personality. Like it pinpointed me exactly. Like I love interacting with other people. She said it's very normal. Most people want to keep the peace. That's kind of one of the main, right? That's like one of the main goals when they're having an interaction with another person. She was like, you're willing to disrupt the peace if there's an end goal in mind that will ultimately be better for everyone. Whereas most people will kind of just stop, let things be smooth. Don't say the thing that disrupts the vibe in the room, right? But yeah, I'm that person. Like if you have toilet paper hanging out of your shoe, I'm going to tell you have toilet paper hanging out of your shoe. I'm not going to let you walk around looking like an idiot, right?
And not judge you because you had toilet
Right. I'm not
paper
saying you're a
hanging from
bad
your shoe.
person. This isn't an attack on your character.
Yeah,
It's
dude,
not a
this is a
character
hookup.
assassination. Like, how dare you have toilet paper? No, like, I don't care, but you do have toilet paper hanging out of your shoe. So maybe you should fix that,
Yeah.
And obviously, that's kind of a silly example, but back to what I was saying before, we kind of went on
Sorry.
a side.
That's the ADD in the
No,
room.
totally. I call it the ADD train. It like we go
Sean
different
calls it the
places.
weave.
The what?
The weave.
Okay, perfect. But someone said to me, like, if you leave your brokerage job, what's the worst that can happen? Let's say you go launch this company, you do it for a year or two, you're not making money, you're not happy doing it, whatever. And they go, can you go back to being a broker? I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, you have to rebuild a book, which sucks. Yeah, and it'd be way easier this time because I already have, connections and, friends and my network. And yeah, I could do that. And anyone will hire me, you know? So they're like, so then what's the problem? Like
Yeah.
and so I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm
Do
just
you
going to
think
do
that
it
that
then.
was the driving force though? So there are um, two ways to move through your career, no matter what you do, in my opinion. Now, this is the best way that I can frame it. I don't even know if I've even said this out loud before, but you can either be pushed or you can be pulled, right? And I've learned this. This is how big of a nerd I am. The Captain America shield didn't give it away. That there was a guy named Bob Lazar, and he's big into like
UFOs.
UFOs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or he worked at Area 51.
Okay.
He was explaining how a UFO worked, that he was reverse engineering, and that they don't have propulsion. So nothing was pushing them.
The
That,
anti-gravity
exactly.
bullshit device.
So they made a void in front of them, and it pulled them where they wanted to go. And just being a business mind, I guess I tried to relate that to business. And I feel like either your purpose and destiny, substitute whatever other word, your passion, I hate that word, is
Okay,
pulling
we'll go
you.
back to that because I love the word passion.
Okay. So that is either pulling you where you're going,
Mhm.
or something bad happened to you, or something great happened to you, or maybe nothing bad could happen to you.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, why not? do this because I could always get a job doing this. So do you feel like something is pulling you where you need to be, or do you think that everything you've done is pushing you to the next step?
Think probably earlier in life. Wait, which one is like you're running from, you're being pulled? I guess I was being pulled.
No, if you're running
No, I
away
was
from something,
being
you
pushed.
push.
I was pushing away from a lot of things. And I would say at this point in life, I finally gotten to a point where like I can pull and I have to be much more intentional about my next steps, right? Um,
Sorry. So let me rephrase that. Do
yeah,
you think that there's something in your future
yeah.
that is pulling you that way? Not that you are pulling anybody or
Okay.
anything. Is something pulling you towards a destiny or a purpose? Or is it everything that you have and everything that you've done pushing you towards the next step? And there's no right or wrong. I
Yeah.
just think that it's different.
I don't know. I think it's a really good question. I think it's probably both, right? It's that thing of like, pray as though everything depended on God, work as though everything depended on you, right? Like, I think that everything is kind of a combination of the work that you've done, the network you've built, kind of the human being that you've cultivated, and like some degree of whether you want to call it luck, God, the universe, whatever. And so you're going to open more doors based upon, these kind of the credentials that you've built up for yourself. And I'm not talking about like academic credentials.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm talking about,
Right.
these human building blocks that you've built by becoming the person that you've become. And then what's behind those doors is often outside of your control. But the likelihood that great things are going to be behind those doors gets better and better as you continue to build a better human, right? And create more experiences and more meaningful experiences and provide more value just generally in life. So probably
Okay.
both. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
no,
most people have a clear like one or the other?
um, yeah, so I guess I've never asked the question. I've never said that
Okay.
out loud, but I can always tell.
Okay. What do you think for me?
I think that you're being pushed. However, it can change. I think it changed with me.
Yeah.
Pushed most of my life. And then with understanding and wisdom and maturity, I started to think bigger. And then with a little bit of success, you can think even bigger.
Right.
And now I can look ahead and realize that, oh, that's the star. That's the gravitational pull that is pulling me towards this. And it was, and this is the best way I can describe it, is my family was like this, has been like this for a long time.
Mhm.
And, maybe like this, but eventually it's going to be like this. I want to be this. I don't need to experience this. But in 100 years from now, when, you look back and my last name means something to the world or whatever, that you look at when everything started to go up, and I want to be that.
Yeah.
I want to change our story.
Yeah.
You
Before
know,
you went parabolic.
what is parabolic? I'm from Indiana.
That curve you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do $10 words.
Yeah, no, but I think actually what you just asked is a very timely question. I think I was kind of getting to it in a roundabout way, was like, I have been in this, like, for lack of a better term, personally and professionally, like kind of incubation period, especially the last few weeks. Actually, this has become like very apparent to me where like the next thing is I'm having to slow down and let myself, because I have a natural inclination, like whether it's ADD or whatever else too, to like when I'm not busy enough and I have the idle hands problem, I start trying to do a million different things just to like get all this energy out, right? And have really tried to lately slow down and think about like, what do I want my next projects to be and why? And I'm finally in a position where, like, to your point, I have the time and the energy and everything to do that. Sometimes too much, where I'm like, what do I do with all of this? Um,
Yeah, have that North Star.
yeah, for sure.
Have not just a reason that you do stuff, and not for a feeling, but for an outcome, a big picture outcome, not something tangible, but like that. What was the word that you used?
Parabolic.
Parabolic. So that parabolic moment, that's what pulls me. Everything that I do is my reason. It's not something that I voice. It's not something that I do, but it's something that, why I get up in the morning. And underneath that are 100 details or a million details of Yeah, because I love my daughter to death. I love my son to death. I love my family to death. Like,
Right.
this is the reason I'm doing it. But I'm also doing it for their kids and their kids and their kids and their kids. And I think what I've done is to my detriment. Detriment. It's another word.
There you go. That's a good one.
But I've cut out all, joy, happiness, or fun, fun just for the sake of fun.
Yeah.
And, I think that in my irrational Indiana brain, I think that that is just required to be a priority and willing to sacrifice to make that dramatic change. And so, people are either driven by happiness or purpose, period. I've never met anybody that's in between that. Either somebody goes out and drinks and has fun with their friends because it makes them happy, or they ask for, holidays off of work because they want to spend time with their family because that's what makes them happy. Or you have somebody that never takes a day off, and no such thing as a 40-hour work week because there is some sort of destiny or purpose or something that they were willing to sacrifice happy for necessary.
Those who don't have purpose will distract themselves with pleasure. Have you heard that?
No, but I love it.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it, of course, but it's a great quote. It's so true, right? And that's exactly like why I say idle hands problem. Like if you're not busy enough, if you don't have enough going on and enough of the right things, right? Because just like grinding out long days for the sake of grinding out long days is not very compelling, right? But really trying to figure it out and do something meaningful.
I'm really big on sayings too. I like that one.
I have a running, you would laugh at me, but I have a running quote list in my phone that's
So
like
do I.
mile long. And then every time I go find a quote I like, I go Google that person and find 2 or 3 more by them and add it to the list. So the list now is like, you could go on for
Well, you're going to make
days,
fun of
but
me
yeah.
because my tattoo or my FU to the corporate world,
Mhm.
because my dad always told me like, hey, you will never get hired if you have tattoos that show and this and
Right.
that, right? And so my FU to the corporate world to that situation was always to get a whole sleeve of tattoos,
Okay.
spiraled quotes
Oh, I love that.
that that kind of got me
What's your
in
favorite
the
one?
right. My favorite quote is, I don't have that tattoo. I want to get that
Oh, okay,
tattoo
okay.
on the to-do list. My favorite is from a speech called How Bad Do You Want It by Thomas. He tells a story about a young man and he wanted to be successful. And so he went to this guru and the guru said, you want to be successful? I'll meet you tomorrow at the beach at 4 a.m. And the kid's like, the beach? Like, I want to be successful. I don't want to go swimming. And so anyways, he's like, you want to be successful? I'll meet you tomorrow, 4 a.m. And next morning, kid shows up at the beach, all ready to go, suit and tie. And he should have wore swim trunks. But the guru says, how bad do you want to be successful? He said, real bad. He said, then walk out into the water. And so he walks out into the beach, into the ocean. And it goes like waist deep. And this guy's like, man, this guy's crazy. Like, I said, I want to be successful. I don't want to swim. He said, you want to be successful? He said, walk a little further. He walked a little further and went up to his shoulder. He's like, man, I'm about to get up out of here. This guy's crazy.
Yeah.
And he's like, I thought you said you wanted to be successful. He said, I do. He said, then walk a little further. So he walked a little further and went up to his mouth, and the guru grabbed him by the head and held him underwater. And he was holding him and holding him and holding him. It seemed like an eternity. And then right before the kid passed out, lifted him up. He said, I got a question for you. He said, when you were underwater, what did you want to do? He said, I just wanted to breathe. He said, when you want to succeed as bad as you wanted to breathe, then you'll be successful. And, but anyways, and he goes on and on through the speech, and he's like, when you're underwater, you don't care about no basketball game. You don't care what's on TV. You don't care about calling you. You don't care about a party. And I think that most people are unable to prioritize something like that, right or wrong. I just think most people can't do that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I think the answers to this question are always interesting. Because you obviously are a huge proponent for entrepreneurship and huge
Huge.
supporter. But do you think that everyone should be an entrepreneur?
I'm no, sorry. I'm a fan of entrepreneurial mindset.
Okay.
Not that you need to go start your business. Even though I respect the hell out of anybody that does take that risk, it could be entrepreneurship, or it could be a commission-only sales job, or it could be a side hustle, or it could be the fact that I want to have 10 kids,
Hmm.
because I'm a hell of a mom or a hell of a dad or whatever, like gambling on yourself, betting on yourself. It doesn't have to be with work. It doesn't have to be with, it has nothing to do with money.
Right.
But I guess here's where some of the brutalness comes in, is that some people are just role players. Some people are, what do they call them?
NPCs.
Yes, NPC, non-playable characters. Some people are that. Most people are that, in all honesty. I don't think any less of their job, whether
Yeah.
you're a janitor or an accountant or whatever. Like
The world takes all
90,
type to go around.
99% of people are NPCs. And just like I'm more into steak than I am chicken, I'm just more into entrepreneurial stuff than I am, data entry. So it's not that any one is more important, but, I think reading Atlas Shrugged really changed my life in the difference between producers and consumers. You could very much be an employee and still be a producer. Like you were saying, right? Like, I want to be in a revenue generating job.
Yeah.
Like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's what gets me
1000%.
excited. I still need the janitor and the trash clean,
Absolutely.
but
The world takes all types. You
yeah,
can't, I mean, if everyone's a lion, you have no gazelle to chase, right?
exactly.
This reminds me of another thing back to kids is like, a lot of people now are just like anti-screens or like limit your screen time. And I kind of go back to that consumer producer mindset with that is like we've always had a consumer create metric where I'm like, if you're building a game or you're doing math or you're like making something, you can stare at your screen for 3 hours.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't care. Like, my one daughter, she's super into coding these games and she'll like go up in her room for an hour or two and come down and be like, what do you want your character to be able to do? And what color do you want this thing to be? And she'll be like, okay. And she'll go away for another hour and come back and like, oh, now it cannot do all these. Like, it's so
Yeah.
cool to watch how she can do that. And I don't have a problem with her using the screen all day long as she's doing that, right? But if you just want to sit around and watch Netflix, like maybe you get 30 minutes a day, But I think we all have to like kind of hold ourselves accountable to that too in various aspects of life, right? Because we live in such a consumerist society. It's really difficult not to get like everything about the environment that we live in wants you to get sucked into the consumerism mindset.
Yeah. Something that I learned as a younger man, um, was how to generate habits. Habits, if you do something 21 days in a row, it could be a habit for life. It will be a habit for a year.
Okay.
21 days, no wiggle room. If you do 20, it's not going to work. I don't know why. Science. But creating habits 21 days in a row,
What are some of the most important habits you've created?
every single morning since 2009 or 2010, I've listened to that speech.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
Interesting.
going on 15 years.
I need to listen to it.
Every single
I'm
morning. Yeah,
sure
I'll send it
I'm
to you.
sure the delivery makes it more, not that your
Oh, yeah.
delivery was bad, but I'm
He's
sure
awesome. He's
the
a
actual speech.
professional
Yeah.
speaker. But yeah, you'll love it. Like, it's my alarm. And that's how I start off my day. Recently, I changed my alarm. I still listen to that, but I changed my alarm to a recording of me. It's like, Zach, get your ass out of bed. Like, let's fucking go. And because that's my motto for 2025 is LFG. And it's a year of action. I'm done talking about stuff. I'm done meeting about stuff. I'm done, brainstorming about stuff. It's a year of action. I felt like
Okay.
2024 just had too much like excess. Let's you know what? We should have a meeting about our meeting coming up where we're going to discuss, the conversation that we're going to have later on.
Yeah. I actually did a Twitter post earlier today that this reminds me of. I said, a lot of people will continue to wait until they feel like they're ready, but you can just realize that readiness is a decision and act on it, right? Because if you're waiting to feel ready, you might never, but you can actually just decide that you're ready now.
Okay, well, that's actually a good segue
Okay.
because the final part here is the lesson,
Okay.
and I want you to teach me something new. I have a couple of specific requests, and then
Okay.
we can dig into your expertise of insurance, property insurance at that. That might be a short section, but I do have two specific questions for you. And so you wrote a book. So she did right here. I don't know. So she did, which is great. Interviews with female leaders, entrepreneurs, and there's several lessons that can be pulled from that, which is awesome. I'd love to talk about your book, and I do a little bit, but I want to talk about being an author versus the content of the book.
Sure.
So say I want to write a book. How difficult was that? And maybe don't harp on that. The question is, walk me through the steps of writing and publishing a book. So I'm sure there's several people out there that have awesome stories
Oh yeah.
that want to write it down. What's the process look like? I have no idea. Like if I wanted a book published, I have no idea who to call.
Yeah. Oh,
Honestly, I'd probably call you.
you can call me anytime. I've actually had a couple of friends since I released my book who have reached out with help through like their creative process and getting their books done. I think I would have done things a little bit different. Like most things, I kind of learned through fumbling through this. You have to kind of decide. I didn't realize before I started looking at writing a book that most people don't actually write their own books. They kind of have an idea
Ghostwriter.
and they hire someone to write their book,
Sure.
right? And so they'll maybe sit with them and say, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that. And then the other person actually writes their book. That's kind of like one tier. And then the other tier is like you write your own book, but you can, join like group editings. You can hire someone to do the editing, etc. Do you want to self-publish or do you want to have a publisher? If you go to most publishers, they are going to try to convince you to write a fiction book as opposed to a nonfiction book. I kept getting told over and over again, most people read 9 pages of nonfiction books and then they put it down and never pick it up again on
As long as
average.
they bought it, I don't care.
Right? I'm like, I don't, yeah. Um, Actually, what that did for me mentally was, I'm a perfectionist in a lot of ways. Like, this is a habit I've had to break, right? Because, that old saying, what do they say? Like, good done is better than perfect or whatever, right? So you have to get comfortable with that at some point. Entrepreneurship will help you with that too. But, the book, I was really like just beating myself up. Like, I had two different versions of the book completely, like done books. And I was like, I can't decide which one I want to publish. I like things from here, I like things from there. I don't like this anymore. And it was like, I finally got to a point where I thought like, okay, it's never going to be perfect. You just need to do it. Right. And then that publisher guy who was kind of a dick and he was trying to convince me he was like, if you write a fiction book, then we can turn it into like Hallmark movie because we have like these contracts with Hallmark and blah, blah, blah. And you can do all the, just like, yeah, you could make more money doing this. But I was like, but that's not the purpose of this book. Right. But then when he said that, like, nobody's going to read it past page 9, I was like, really? I don't need to stress out about it past page 9 anymore. You have no idea what you just did for me, right? Because he like kind of released me from my own mind in that regard. But yeah, I mean, you need to do things like if you don't have a publisher, if you're going to self-publish, you need to go get an ISBN number, which you can do. Like, you go on Fiverr or one of those and hire someone to do it for you. It's like, I don't know, $50, $100. It's not expensive, but it takes a little bit of time. So you need to like give yourself
What is
some.
ISBM?
ISBN is it's this number on the back of every book.
It's like a social
So
security number for your book.
yeah, your hardcover needs one, your softcover needs one. If you do Kindle or ebook, that needs a separate one. One thing I would advise that I did not realize until after I had released my book was like, choose either a hardcover or a softcover. Don't release both. I did both. And what it did is then, because they have separate ISBN numbers, they compete against each other on bestseller lists. So like at one point, in like real estate, I was like number 32 here and number 34 here. Like if I hadn't had the two different versions, if everybody had been buying one, then 15. So yeah, that's one thing. I would never release a hardcover and a softcover again. Don't do that.
Is there any strategy in people buy more paperback because it's a little cheaper, or?
I don't know. I think that there's probably some truth to that, but I mean, it's a couple dollar differential, right? For me, I would print some samples and see what looks better. Like my book, the hardcover looks a lot better than
The glossy type of.
doesn't look good in the softback.
I ordered
What
the softback.
did you? Well, you get me stuck with it. The other thing I realized was like when you are, most of my book sales are done through Amazon. Like the quality of print varies pretty tremendously from like one book to another. Like even just the color, like this is kind of a light pink. I've seen ones where it's like almost a dark pink. I've seen some where it's like totally washed out like white gray, and there's really nothing you can do about that. So it's you upload like your manuscript, and then you have someone, unless you want to design your own cover, but I don't.
So you didn't buy 1,000 copies, and so you don't have inventory. Like as people order it, that's when it's made.
Right. And so once you realize that with like the printing and the irregularities and things, you'll notice why a lot of people who have written several books will have like certain colors, right? Like blue, green, white, black, just
no custom colors. It's like the primary colors.
They just tend to print better, more consistently. So I don't know, little things like that you pick up along the way, right? Formatting, you'll see weird things, like you'll notice this one has no page numbers. Some of them came out with no page numbers, so then I had to go in and like change everything again. And then I think since then all of them have printed with page numbers, but I don't know what was wrong with like the Amazon KDP the first time around. And then Amazon was actually nice too, because it gives you a timer. So if you are a person who will like edit it to death, even if you have like a due date in the back of your head, seeing that timer where it's like you've said what date your book is going to be released and you have to upload it there. I don't remember if it's like 7 or 10 days or whatever before is like your final. You can't make any more changes after that. So then, and it literally has a countdown timer. So I would some days like go in and just like look at that timer for a minute or two. Like it would be like, you have like 12 days left, 12 days, 6 hours, 3 minutes and 27 seconds, and just watch it count down for a couple of minutes. I'm like, okay, I got 12 days.
Someone could still order it as is, or no?
Yeah, no, you can order it, but that's well, you can't.
That's interesting that it could be for sale and you could still be making edits.
You can make edits whenever.
Okay.
Yeah. They can. Well, if you think about it, it's not uncommon for people to release like a new version of a book or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe you add like a forward or, you know, the other thing I've noticed.
Like that's one of those obvious things though, maybe to you, but as a consumer, I assume there are boxes of books laying around and, you know, at the warehouse in Amazon.
Yeah.
When really it's a printer in the warehouse of Amazon.
If you are like a bestseller and if you're working with a publisher, if you think you're going to sell 1 million copies, yes, they have inventory ahead of time. But for most people, I mean, if you're going to sell, you know, less than, I don't know, a couple 100,000 copies of your book, you don't want to print inventory ahead of time. There's no point.
They're like clothing and stuff. You
totally.
Print on demand type stuff. I don't know why that never crossed my mind, but because I use print on demand all the time.
Yeah, because imagine how many people upload books to Amazon. I mean, literally anyone could do it, right?
I honestly thought they had a big library.
So because imagine if they printed even 50 copies of every book.
Oh, I know.
Right? And I would just say, you know, look, if you go into writing a book, to your point, make sure it's something that has purpose and that you're, I won't say passionate, but that means something to you. Because unless you are like, you have a big following or, you know, unless there's some reason to believe that you're going to sell a bunch of copies of this book, it's certainly not a money-making venture. Like you're not getting rich off of writing a book. So
you didn't go into it thinking I'm going to get rich off this book.
No, you make like $2 a copy, $3 a copy. I don't even know, but it's not, you know, if you sell 1 million copies, that's kind of nice. But if you sell, you know, I mean, it's not life-changing money, right?
Yeah. Okay. So why did you write a book?
So I started during COVID, like when we were in lockdown and I was at home with two kids and losing my mind. And again, I don't sleep much. I've been like this since I was a kid. I sleep like 3 or 4 hours a night. It's always been that way.
Weird. I'm a night owl and an early bird.
Yeah.
It's a bad combination.
I don't know if it's bad. I actually was just talking to someone about this earlier today. I think it's a net positive because I don't feel tired either. If I felt tired all the time, it would suck. I think it's actually a genetic thing. Think so. I'll send it to you, but there's something I read recently that said, yeah, maybe linked to a certain.
Oh yeah, I did hear that. But I, you know, maybe that is true. I've always chalked it up to, this is going to sound shallow, but like FOMO. But I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
In my life, but it's a feeling I get. So it's like going on so if you got in your car at midnight and you went and drove around your town or whatever, and parking lots are empty and it's quiet, and there's a feeling that you get that you know something that nobody else in the world knows. When you wake up really early, there's still fog on the road, and you're going for a jog, there's a feeling that you know something that nobody else in the world does. When you're the first to show up at work or when you're the last one to leave, you know that you were more productive or whatever. It's some secret that you have that nobody else in the world has. And it's always been that for me. I've always been scared to go to bed. I would lay there
Just
forever.
sleep when you die.
Yeah, like I'm like consuming information at all hours of the night,
Yeah.
or working on something or game planning or whatever. And then I have to get up early before everybody. When I'm drinking coffee, everybody else is sleeping. When I'm, taking notes for the day, everybody else is sleeping. And then when it's go time, preparation meets opportunity equals success.
Yep. Um,
Sorry, I totally threw
no,
you off
you're
there.
good. You're good. But yeah, so I had a lot of extra hours in the day and you weren't able to really go outside and do much at that point. And one statistic that I kept hearing over and over again that was really bothering me was that 70% of the commercial insurance industry is female. And I was like, that doesn't ring true with my experience at all,
Is
right?
female?
Is female. Yeah. So you just did what I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I started digging into it more, and the people who were like putting those numbers out, I think actually probably were correct, but I never saw women in the insurance industry that I noticed because they weren't producers, right?
So it's like 3 service people to every one producer.
That kind of goes back to our talk before. And so that was kind of the whole precipice of writing that book, was like, we don't just need more women working. That doesn't really benefit anyone. We need more women to understand why it's important to be in a position of ownership and equity. And if you're going to work, like, make real money, right? Don't just go be someone's account manager forever. Unless like this is, hey,
That's your thing.
the kids are in school and I want to work part-time or what, like, no shade to anyone who decides to do that. But if your goal is to excel in your career or make money or whatever the case may be, you need to be in a position where you're revenue generating or you have ownership or equity in a company. You can't just go be on someone's service team.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dig into that. And I have 2 more questions for you, but let's dig into that a little bit more. I tell my wife this morning, I was like, man, I hope I don't offend her.
What? Oh no, I'm not easily offended.
Okay, good. Well, yeah, like, and after doing some research and listening to some of the things, I'm like, all right, no, she has thick skin, like she's cool.
You're good.
So I have one side of me is I have a daughter.
Yeah.
And she's my world. Oh my gosh. She's got me wrapped around her hanger. Yeah, I would say it's even beyond that.
Okay.
I love this. Everything I do is to position her and my son for success. Like every day, every single day, whenever she goes to bed, and every time I say bye to her going to school, and every time I walk away from her, actually, it's, hey, one day, you and me, and then she says, we're going to take over the world.
Aww,
like, all right.
I love that.
And it's just, it's like at that level, like you are going to be a badass.
Yeah.
Not a badass woman, not a badass female, not a badass for a girl. You're going to be a badass. And so that's the other side of me, is feminism, in my opinion. This was the part where I was hoping, I don't know what your stance is.
Yeah.
But I think that what it has become toxic to the relationship between men and women, to victim versus, just a victim mentality versus a badass mentality or being a producer mentality. And I feel like a lot of the feminist type of thoughts or talking points or sayings have been forced on people in a politically correct type of way, and it is mutated into something toxic. And I say that somebody surrounded by women and love women, and not because they're women, because of who they are.
Right.
And
this
so
is a conversation
it's
I
an
have
internal
a lot.
battle that I have with, of course, I want my daughter to have every advantage and every blah, blah, blah. I don't want her to have any of it for free, or, because it deserved, or people before her struggled, she didn't struggle.
Right. This is a conversation I have a lot, and I will get some heat for this, especially from other women.
Oh, yeah. And there's going to be millions of people to watch this. So
yeah, I think most of the women that I know, certainly most of the women in that book who have built something, right, don't want to be the best woman at anything. They just want to be the best at something, right?
Exactly.
And we don't want, like, I don't know any like high achiever who wants to work with a handicap. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it almost becomes a detriment. Feminism has become, well, a lot of our political system in general too has kind of become this bastardized version of what it was intended to be, right? Like the original intent of feminism was like women should be able to have rights, women should be have access to equal opportunities that men have access to. And like a lot of, I don't know if minority is the right word for women, but it seems like there's a lot of us, but
More women than men, right?
I think we live longer. Like there probably are
Protected
more,
class.
whatever. Yeah. It becomes at a certain point this warped thing of like, probably with the best of intentions, this may have gone too far.
It becomes
Right.
patronizing.
Right. And
I I would be offended
I
by
think
a
the
lot of
other way that feminism has really become toxic is like it used to be, allow women to have freedom of choice, and I'm not talking about certain, body things or whatever else, but just, do you want to work? Do you want to stay home? Do you want to raise a family? Do you want to, whatever. You don't need your dad or your brother to sign a loan for you, car loan. Like, yeah, that kind of feminism is great. Like, I don't want to have to go call my dad at 40 years old if I'm an unmarried woman and be like, hey, I need to take out a car loan. Will you co-sign this for me? But when it gets to a point where like it's almost toxic now, where like if you decide to be a stay-at-home mom, that's a problem, because you're not this like girl boss or whatever. And that's another thing, like this whole, I don't know. I mean, I've, had a certain level of success as a woman, and I'm sure I'll continue to have more success just based on the trajectory I'm on now. But I think a lot of women have this thing. It's a lot of the training that we get to as young women. Hopefully, I think it's better now, but where it's like if you want to compete with men, you need to like compete in a man's world by beating them at being men. And it's like,
exactly.
no, like a lot of people will tell me like, we can't believe how successful you are and like how soft you are at the same time. I'm like, well, yeah, because I don't need to be hard. I'm never going to be better at a man than being a man, but I can be better at a man in sales by being a woman.
Yeah.
And not because I'm a woman, but just because women naturally have a different set of gifts,
Skills.
right? And so instead of like trying to compete with the boys by being a boy, try to compete with the boys because you have a different set of unique skills that you can bring to the table, right?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Do you feel like a lot of people will try to be something that they're not?
Well, yeah.
And I think that a lot of that is forced because of, just societal pressure, I guess, or quite frankly, brainwashing that I don't want you to be a man. I want you to be you. Whatever that is, be you, whether it's a stay-at-home mom or whether it's a CEO or whether it's, something in between. But I say the same thing about men. Be you. Like you could be the best stay-at-home dad, or you can be, but just be the best. And just this categorization of it's, yeah, I think you said it right. Like nobody wants to be the best with a handicap.
For this thing. It's like someone saying like, you're attractive for a woman in her 30s. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Or like, you're really good at this for someone, like, you're really good at this for a guy who's 5'9". Like,
Yeah,
like, it's like, what,
I'm 6 foot. Just say,
like, okay, like, can we not just like, you're good at this, or maybe you're not,
yeah,
maybe if you have to use these qualifying statements, then
yeah,
maybe you're just not good at that thing. And that's another thing that we need to accept.
you're exactly right. And so, yeah, just with my daughter, I've quickly corrected anytime she's heard something that, first female to do this or first, whatever, female should not even be a thing. Like, not a thing. I said
Female
that
should be a
it is a
thing for
thing,
sure.
but
Yeah. Let's keep
it
some
shouldn't
women
be a
around.
qualifier,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you said it best. It's not a qualifier. Either you're the best or you're not.
I think I'll take a little bit of a different position on that. Like, let's say, I'll use professional chess as an example, right? Like, for hundreds of years, women were not allowed to play in professional chess leagues. So, in something like that, like, yeah, the first like female grandmaster chess player is impressive and it is important because she literally was not allowed to even compete before, right? So, if it's something like that, I can see where like being the first female at something has a place. But if it's just like an achievement that maybe nobody's done before, like, don't you want to just be known for that achievement versus like what you did that achievement and you have female anatomy, like why does that change
Yeah,
how
you don't do that for
important the
boys.
thing you did
You
was,
don't do that
right?
for
Yeah.
men.
You don't go, oh, he was the first boy to do, well, maybe now you do, but
First male swimmer to win the female swimming. Yeah, that's a rabbit hole in itself. Um, okay, yeah, I did want to talk to you about that because of my daughter, and I want to make sure that I teach her what I want to teach her, but also in the right way, in a not an ignorant way. You know what I mean? And that's why I wanted to talk to you, just to get a little bit of insight from a female champion, right? That's not a qualifier. You're a champion for females. I wanted to understand a little bit of that, and maybe I can craft my message a little bit better, not change the message, but craft it better and understand, some of the things I'm saying more.
I think a lot of the best things you can do for a girl are the best things you can just do as a parent, right? And that's like, let them be themselves, like help them build the best version of themselves, but don't try to push them outside of what they are, right? And like, let them be really confident in who they are and what they're good at, like what they're legitimately good at, right? Don't bullshit them, because then you're not doing anybody any favors. Because like we talked about earlier, they're going to get out in the real world one day and be like, oh, well, I was always told that I was like going to be a Grammy winning singer, and you're like, record something and it sounds terrible, like this is not going to fly, right? At some point reality is going to hit them in the face, and so you don't want to have kept them in bubble wrap their whole lives. But at the same time, like, let them feel really good about themselves. And I think that's one thing that a lot of women in my generation didn't have, was like, we constantly had this pressure of like, nothing that girls do is ever good enough because you're a girl, period, point blank. And I think that's different now. Like, that has kind of gone away, again, maybe too far the other way. But I think like just letting young girls and women, like, and there is a difference between boys and girls, and that's okay, but like, you can be good at the things that you're good at, and like, let's focus on that. You don't need to like compete in boys football, you don't need to like be the quarterback of the
Yeah.
football team.
At some point, like physics and, anatomy plays a
Right.
role.
Right. Well, I mean, it's really no different in my mind than anything else. Like, if you're not a good basketball player, you can play basketball and have fun, and that's good. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. Like, there's a place for hobbies, right? But you need to not overinvest your time and energy into basketball, because you're not going to be a professional basketball player, And I think having that real honest conversation with anyone really at any point, because I see that even with adults where they're like, well, I really want to do this thing. And it's like, okay, great. Here's what you're going to have to do that thing. Are you actually willing to do those things? And are you good enough at those things, even if you did them? And those are not fun conversations, but I think they're necessary.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about building a following.
Okay. Yeah. Online.
Yeah, so I want to talk about building a following because I know that you've spoken a lot about X or Twitter, now X. And I don't do the Instagram or Facebook or any of that stuff. So is X and LinkedIn your two primary platforms? And walk me through building a following. I mean, I know building a personal brand is kind of one of your, I would say, expertise and maybe interests moving forward. Maybe we can tease the second book on personal branding. But like I said at the very beginning of this, I feel like you came out of nowhere, and I say that with all due respect. I just didn't know of you, and I should have, because we're in such a similar space.
Right.
And now you're crushing it, and I'm super proud of you, and and I'm excited to see what's next. But like, how did you do that? I post on X all the time, and I get like 47 views.
Yeah.
And like, what's some of the strategy, some of the actionable items people can take, or was it just luck?
I think it's a combination of things, like anything. So part of why, because you're not the first person to say, like, you came out of nowhere, right? Part of why that is true, especially as respects social media, is because I had an employer for a long time who was completely anti-social media.
Okay.
And so it was like a hard, fast rule that no one who worked for the company was allowed to be online.
Are you on other platforms very much?
Not really. No. I mean, I have an Instagram, but I think I have like maybe 500 followers. Like it's private. I don't do anything on Instagram.
So talk to me about X first,
Sure.
because I can post stuff,
Yeah.
nothing.
We'll start
Or
with,
I could cheat and pay.
yeah.
But
We'll start with LinkedIn, actually. So when I started working in a place where I was allowed to have social media, because I wasn't until, I don't know, 2.5-ish years ago, right?
Mhm.
I was like, I think I really started paying attention to like this phenomenon of like inbound leads and being able to make sales based on just like not even creating a persona, but just literally being online, right? Kind of creating this perception of being a thought leader or whatever. And I really didn't, I mean, I certainly didn't have any formal social media training. I think part of it is just natural for me. Like I grew up in the generation where like we were online, right? We were dial up AOL chat rooms, but like I was a nerd and we were online a lot. Yeah, I was like, that's the asylum that raised me. So I think, there's something very natural about social media for probably people my age-ish. And the other thing is like, I just kind of nerded out on the algorithms and what you needed to do to kind of optimize your views and everything else.
Okay, so you were like digging in, like Tuesday, 10 a.m. is the best time to post,
So
that type of stuff.
I started first with LinkedIn, and it basically was like you want to post every day, and you want to post every day, and then you want to be interacting with other people's posts. Like that's one of the most important metrics for LinkedIn, or was at the time. And so what I did was I just said, okay, I'm going to do this consistently for a year and just see how it turns out. So I would develop content for the week, like every Sunday or whatever. I get a lot of ideas when I go work out or go run. So I would I would keep notes in my phone consistently, right? And then on Sundays, I would like type them all out for the week. On LinkedIn, it's nice because you can schedule them all in advance. So you can just like, this is Monday, this is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then you don't have to really touch it again. But the more important part, especially when you're first building, because for the first couple of months is when it's real awkward because you're putting all this stuff out into the universe and nobody's like talking to you, right? And you're like, is this working? Is this thing on? But then I started dedicating an hour a day to commenting on other people's posts.
Okay.
And that was really when like the algorithm starts supporting you. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. Like once you I almost have like this sixth sense now where you can like get in tune with the algorithm and it feels like this dance. Like you kind of just work with it. Like you can tell when the algorithm changes before the platform tells you that the algorithm has changed because you can see that the types of content that you were posting before aren't performing as well. And then, so LinkedIn was very intentional for me. Twitter was kind of the exact opposite, where I was like, a lot of people have encouraged me to join Twitter because of, CRE community there. And I had always heard really negative things about Twitter. And I just thought, like, I don't want to subject myself to that. Why would I? Right? Like, I don't need to. And I wasn't sure that, like, my type of client was going to be there anyways, which actually, I'll eat crow on this one. Totally opposite from what I expected. I've done more business from Twitter than I have from LinkedIn.
Interesting.
But I just got there and kind of started posting. I think I had a little bit of a boost there early. I mean, there's a few things to take into consideration, right? One, we'll just address the elephant in the room, which is like Twitter's a 70-ish% male platforms. Being a blonde woman who's like not hideously ugly doesn't hurt. You're going to get more eyes, right? Maybe not the right kind of eyes, but you're naturally going to get more flow there, right? The other thing is that Twitter has like a really strong real estate community. So Retwit or Rex now is like this commercial real estate corner of Twitter. And so once I joined and there was really no other person who was talking about insurance, which was like the biggest topic in commercial real estate at that point, the fastest growing expense line item in commercial real estate. And nobody on Twitter had an insurance expert there. And so I think I just kind of got adopted into these circles really early on.
Filled a void there.
A lot, yeah. So a couple of like big accounts either followed me or like commented on my stuff or reposted me. And there was definitely like a certain boost in the beginning that helped. I would say that what really helped beyond that was just like I never had with Twitter the same kind of specific plan that I had with LinkedIn. I just kind of jumped in and like really liked being on Twitter. So, and I think definitely like some optimization for, the amount of time that you spend on there, how much you're posting, how much you're responding. My rule for myself in the beginning was like everyone who comments, you respond to their comment because that's helping boost the algorithm, right? So, I mean, once you have a couple posts that are like getting a lot of views and getting a lot of comments, I mean, certain posts, like it can take an hour just to respond to everyone who had commented on it, right? But for the first 6 months or so, I would say I was like extremely consistent with that. Now I've pulled back a little bit. It starts to get to a point where you just can't respond to everyone and like do your job, run your company and your family and everything else. But I do still try. I mean, I try to respond to everyone as often as I can. But I don't know. There's something about that platform just kind of adopted me. And when I started, I was just talking about insurance and real estate. And then somebody told me, aim for 30% viral, 70% value. So 70% of the time, be posting things about your core topics, right? That's one thing that I would say for anyone who's considering building a social media presence too, is like before you do anything, sit down and create like a boundary sheet of like what you are going to post about and what you're not going to post about. Like for me, I'll post about my family, but I'm not posting pictures of them. I never
Sure.
post any
Yeah.
pictures inside of my home. I never post pictures of my
Yeah.
kids doing anything. That's like a hard boundary for me. Like
That's why I don't do Instagram or Facebook.
yeah, people know I have kids, but they have no idea what they look like, and I want to keep it away, right? And so yeah, know what you're going to post about, what you're not going to post about, and then on you got to just dedicate time to being on the whatever platform you're trying to grow. I know other people do it, they'll buy followers or they'll do whatever. I don't really see the benefit of that, especially for me. Especially with Twitter, I never got on trying to build a following because I didn't think that a following there would benefit me anyway. My thought was kind of like, hey, if I land $100,000 revenue account off of paying $17 a month for Twitter, then it's probably worth it, right?
So, so do you see social media as quantity or quality? Like, is it the number of followers or is it the type of followers? Obviously, both. You want a lot of the right followers.
You even want some of the wrong followers is
Yeah.
kind of the conclusion that I've come to, because yeah, I mean, having 10 quality followers is more valuable than having 100 garbage followers or like followers who aren't or bots or whatever.
But 100 followers give you credibility for the 10
And it
followers
helps
to
boost in the algorithm. So
exactly.
the more followers you have, the more eyes you get. And the more eyes you get, the more likely you are to get those quality followers or quality eyes on you. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a quantity quality teeter-totter, I would say, where quality is absolutely the most important metric, but having a certain amount of quantity is going to help you boost that quality metric more naturally.
For sure. Okay. So I have five like questions real quick.
Okay.
I'll just get spit them at you. Are there any shortcuts?
In social media,
Yeah.
I haven't found any. I mean, yeah, you can do things like buy followers. If you have friends who have big accounts, you can ask them to help boost you or whatever. That's not something that ever felt right to me. But again, like I never got on social media looking to build a following. I got on social media thinking like maybe I can do a little business. I don't know.
So you don't do anything with influencers or any of that stuff for the purpose of kind of boosting
No, I mean,
your
one
shit.
interesting thing, and I kind of like just my value system hates this, but like as you get more followers, people who are kind of in those bands start talking to you, which I'm at like, I don't know, like 20,000 on Twitter now. Like once you get to like 10,000, then people who have 10,000 like start tagging you in things and talking to you and stuff. And it becomes this kind of, you kind of see behind the scenes, where it's like there's this different like culture there where a follower count means something, and I'm like, I just don't relate to that really. Like I like people who have 5 followers and might like someone who has 5 million. I don't know.
I have that problem on LinkedIn. Like people will tag me and stuff.
Yeah.
Every single day I have to untag myself from something. I mean, like, and it's industry people even. And they're
Yeah.
like, they tag me on the fact that their daughter got a soccer trophy. I'm
Weird.
like,
Yeah.
dude,
Well, that's another thing is like a lot of people will use hashtags, and on LinkedIn for a while they were like, you wanted 3 to 5 hashtags on every post, and the algorithm was like very specific on what you wanted to do in regards to that. On Twitter, you don't really need them. And I think on LinkedIn even anymore, you don't really need them. But yeah, you'll see those weird posts where like people will post about something and then just tag a bunch of people who like aren't related. I I don't know if they think they're doing that to like boost their
there's a window
yeah.
that works and anything outside that window hurts.
Okay.
It's black and white.
Yeah.
There is no in between. There's a window, 3 hashtags work, 6 hashtags hurt.
Yeah, it's 3 to 5 on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
So I've also heard the same thing about scheduling. A lot
Okay.
of the YouTubers that talk about this kind of stuff is scheduling hurts you,
Yeah.
even though it's convenient and but all the social media, they look at that as the blob. So get people to schedule stuff so we actually have content on our stuff, but
Okay.
they are not a focus of boosting. The algorithm does not favor scheduling. It actually hurts it because you're not on the platform to comment, reply, like you're not participating. You're scheduling. I've heard the same thing about the time frames that you post stuff. If you post something in the middle of the night, it hurts you because they're not going to show something, or it shows when you posted it, and so anyways, like Tuesday at 10 o'clock, Thursday at 10. And then the way it works is that your first ring of friends or connections on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, it gets you to your second ring of friends.
Hmm.
Thursday is your third degree connections. And then Friday, they redo your first ring of friends if it was a successful post. And so that's why Tuesday is the best, because you get all the rest of the working days. If you do Thursday, you get Thursday and Friday, but nobody's on LinkedIn Saturday and Sunday, really.
I've actually
So
found
these are all
yeah.
generalities. So those were in the guidebook from
Okay.
LinkedIn for the algorithm. These do not maximize your
I must
posts.
just have a lot of people in my network who are on LinkedIn on the weekends because I often am like, why are you here right now? um,
Okay, so no shortcuts. What about, have you outsourced anything? Have you ever
um,
considered it or looked into it?
back to timing real
Sorry.
quick. I found that the most beneficial timing, especially on Twitter for me, is like between 4 and 5 a.m. Pacific time.
Twitter,
And
not LinkedIn.
not LinkedIn. I think the reason for that is you've got but probably the reasoning would carry over to LinkedIn too. You've got the East Coasters who are up and like already just like headed into work or whatever. And so you kind of get that first round of people and you have eyes on it. And then you're working with the time zones, right?
Well, then you double up. So whenever at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, when people on the West Coast start looking at stuff, it's people on the East Coast lunchtime. So they go back on it. So you double up the second round of the same day. You get to double up. And it's funny you say it, because I used to show up whenever I would make cold calls. I made 300 cold calls a day for 2 years straight. And I would show up at the office at 5 o'clock in the morning so I could call East Coast companies that are opening at 8. I had 3 hours by myself in the office. But yeah,
Yep.
that's smart, obvious, but smart, right? That people miss.
Right. And I'm up anyways. Like my clients all know, call me anytime in the morning you want. Like you call me at 3 in the morning, I'll probably be up. 5, I'll for sure be up, you know? But yeah, no, posting in the morning is the most beneficial for sure.
What about AI? Do you use any sort of technical support in
No,
creating content or editing content or posting content or scheduling content? I mean, like Hootsuite, where you can schedule on multiple platforms or anything like that.
no. And in terms of creating I think I'll go back to like a huge overarching point here. Any success that I've had on social media, I think is 1,000% a result of its authentic engagement with me. So outsourcing or doing AI just doesn't work, right? I think the reason that I have the connections that I have on social media is because they want to interact with me. You can make a judgment call whether that's a good choice or not. I don't know. But I've always been myself, right? And on LinkedIn, I definitely lean into like a more professional side of myself. Like, have you seen that meme where it's Tiger Woods and John Daly?
Yes.
Okay,
Love it.
I feel like that's me on LinkedIn and me on Twitter, right? Like they're both me, but you get a different side on Twitter, right? And so the fact that the Twitter followers grow faster must mean that people like the more they like the John Daly side, right? But I mean, most of
I
my
think
content,
LinkedIn is coming around to that, though. I think society in general is waking up to like people being genuine or not genuine. And just like we were talking a little bit earlier before the podcast, that I'm at the point in my life and career, and have been for a while, that I F it. Either they like me or they
right?
don't. But come to find out, people love that. And the right people love that. And that is a segue to my next question, is there are cheap, I say cheap because it doesn't seem genuine. There are cheap tricks to
Mhm.
work within the algorithm. I'll give you an example on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn prioritizes the amount of space your post takes up on someone's screen.
Okay.
Vertical video works better because it takes up more
Yeah.
inches on the screen. That's why you see people writing every other line.
Oh, that's so annoying. Okay.
That's what I see. That's
Yeah.
what I say is cheap. Like, I know why you're doing
Right.
this, and you're looking for cheap views, right?
Right.
It only shows 3 lines, so you leave a cliffhanger on the 3rd line, so they have to click show more. It takes up more space on the screen. LinkedIn wanted a more visual experience, so they started weighing emojis. You put emojis,
Okay.
and they'll boost your stuff. So all of a sudden, you just saw this big wave of emojis on LinkedIn. Eventually, you see a post that has an emoji to start off. It leaves you a cliffhanger. They're writing every other line and don't get to the point until the very end, right? And it's like a pyramid scheme almost, or one of those multi-level marketing type of pitches that you get. Like, dude, just you're burying the lead. Just tell me. I think you see a spike in interest, and then you see a cliff. Like, all right, I'm on to your tricks. Like, this is cheap type of stuff. But I think everybody falls into that. I think I had 3 days in a row where I kind of fell into that, and I'm like, I feel like I need a shower after doing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't me.
Well, I think like AI generated content still has that vibe too, right? Like you can, especially on LinkedIn, you can tell that a lot of people are like, yeah, typing it into ChatGPT, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel. There's that uncanny valley thing where you're like, I know you didn't write this,
Right.
you know?
And so I think that there is a balance where knowing what is favorable to the algorithm is important, but I would say that the shortcut is to truly add value. The shortcut is the hard thing to do.
Usually is.
I think
Yeah.
that you're going to produce the best results. The purer it is, the better it's going to be. And that's hard to swallow for some people that, oh man, I actually have to put in work and I actually have to comment on people and engage and start real conversations, not trick people into replying. Like even when people post something, they'll ask a question because they want people to respond. So the algorithm boosts the stuff. It's just cheap and disingenuous, I think.
Engagement bait.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that it's not wrong. There's no moral thing here. Just think it's cheap and people are always looking for that stuff. And if you know some of this stuff, it's very easy to identify.
Yeah. I think there are ways to probably optimize your social media strategy without going too far, right? Like if I'm going to I know on Twitter now, like if you have one big post that gets a lot of views, your next like 2 or 3 posts will get some favor like from the algorithm. So they'll get better views than they otherwise would have. So now like if I'm going to post, a picture of my dog or a picture of me, because I know that will get the most views. Nothing scandalous, guys. Like that's gonna get the most views. Well, if I have like an insurance post that I really want to do, I'm gonna put that after something that's probably not insurance related because insurance related posts never get the most views, right? So like have one that like gets a lot of engagement, and then the next day post your insurance thing, and that's gonna at least get in front of more eyes than it would
Well,
otherwise.
I think there's a difference between strategy and gimmick.
Totally, 1,000%.
Okay. Yeah, and I would agree with you. And I think it also serves the greater good when people truly focus on value. I like your 70-30 comment because if everybody took that approach, I think it would clean up a lot of stuff,
1,000%.
right?
Yeah.
And prevent me from having to unfollow a bunch of people.
Right.
But I,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing as kind of like now you go to industry conferences and things, and you can tell where most of these conferences have switched to a pay for play model where it's like pay, 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever, and you can be on the panel. And it's like, what that ends up doing is decreasing the value of the panel because the people who are paying to come to the conference want to hear from the best speakers. And instead of hearing from the most qualified people, now they're hearing from the people who were willing to pay 5 grand to be there. Like I always tell people, look, if you're having to pay to be in a room, that's not a room that you should be in
right.
that values you.
Yeah.
With a few exceptions, right? But for the most part, if you're going to speak somewhere, like they should be offering you at least free room and board and a free ticket to the thing. If you're paying 10 grand to be in a room and speak in front of people, you're probably not qualified to speak in front of those people. And that's okay. But also they know, and I think the organizations that are doing that are starting to get kind of a negative perception around them in general, where like less people are now going to those conferences and things. And it's the same thing plays out on social media where, a lot of times the loudest voices are the people who kind of have the least to say. And a lot of the like most quality posts go unnoticed. But again, back to, the main point, like you only need one right person to see things. You don't need 100,000 people to see your post. In fact, I can say for sure, like what my ideal client looks like, there will never be a post where 10,000 of them see. I don't even know if there's 10,000 of them in the US. Like, I mean, there's probably 10,000, there's probably not 100,000, but like, yeah, you don't need that. You just need to have enough momentum that it's going to get in front of some eyes and you might reach that one right person,
Right.
Yeah,
I think that it's funny you said that people should be paying you to speak because you're
right.
adding value. But I think also there's an opposite side of that coin so I was going to go to this conference, and what made me not go was that The Rock was going to be a speaker.
Okay.
Like, what the hell does The Rock have to do with, entrepreneurship? And maybe he is an entrepreneur in a way or whatever, but I could tell that it was about his popularity, and, they were trying to get fans of The Rock to be there. I'm like, man, I think it just poisoned the pool of people that are going to show up, and it's going to dilute the value added of on stage, content that I'm going to consume. I don't need to hear about Rock's Moana experience.
Yeah.
That's not why I'm paying $1,500 to come to this
Right.
thing. So I ended up not going because of that. Okay. Interesting. You got a hell of a presence on social media. So great job. I think it is of high value in the insurance space, which is a segue to my next question.
Yeah.
But like, kudos to you. Talking about property insurance is a tough thing. And, I saw you do it once, and I'm like, okay, this is a throwaway post or whatever, like a billboard effect type thing. And he did it again. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then he did it again. I'm like, man, this poor girl is like
I had 16
fighting a
years of
losing
content
battle.
built up. I just didn't
Yeah.
know it.
So you're fighting a losing battle, and then you did it again and again and again and again. And I'm like, good for her for sticking with it.
Yeah.
And ultimately it paid off. And so, yeah, anyways, good for you for doing that. I think that consistency is something that people do not talk about enough.
And that's the most important thing
And being
with
able
social media.
to push through. The first hump is the hardest. The second hump, maybe even a little bit harder. And the third hump gets, maybe equally as hard. And then the fourth hump is, a little smaller. And the fifth hump, is a little smaller. There are hurdles that you need to get over. But if you are able to push through all of that, and I think it's a good metaphor or analogy. I'm not sure I'm from Indiana.
For a lot of
that
things.
is, but for a lot of things, being an entrepreneur or, being a good parent, you're going to fail several times in the beginning.
Every day. Several times every day.
Yeah. And yeah, anything that you do. So good for you. I think it says a lot about you pushing through that in, let's be real, boring type of content, not necessarily sexy, but important.
Right. Well, it's sexy when people start realizing that they can save 7 figures a year on their insurance premium. That's when it gets sexy for people, right? Is when it impacts your bottom line.
But you got to get past the initial.
I'm talking about it. Hi, I'm talking about insurance.
Exactly.
I'll say this about social media too, because a lot of people will say like, well, you spend a lot of time on there. Is it worth it? For ATW, like our 1 year mark will be July 1st, and we're on pace to do 7 figures in revenue the first year. I spent less than $5,000 in startup costs. I didn't take any money from anybody, and right now I'm just paying me. So it's a lot of net income, right? 60 to 70% of it is from social media, either first order or second or third order. Someone on social media saw me and introduced me to someone else. I'm counting that as a social media lead. But yeah, consistently 60 to 70% of our revenue has been inbound social media leads because I don't send any outbound DMs.
Interesting. That's
it's real money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Especially for like just shit posting on Twitter, like it's actually insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So let's dig into your expertise. And I think that this is where
Okay.
you could probably teach me something that I don't already know.
Sure.
Property insurance. My saying is if I never write another property policy, I will be the happiest broker in the world.
Okay.
And here's why. Again, this is Indiana brain, or maybe even a man's mind, is I went after workers' compensation. And I noticed it my first week that workers' compensation in California is the most expensive type of policy that you can buy in California. And it was the simplest. Nothing special about it. It's pretty cut and dry. There are strategies that you can implement, and we do. But it was the simplest and the most expensive.
Mhm.
And third, that I noticed later on as an entrepreneur is it's the least likely to get you in any sort of trouble.
Mhm.
As far as like E&O or any of that, like
All the
almost
forms are
zero
standardized.
liability.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I went after. Maybe it was the path of least resistance, or maybe it was this genius move. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then there's this girl on social media that talks nothing but property insurance. I'm like, man, there's got to be something wrong with her. I need to talk to her.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest reason I wanted to talk to you today is about property insurance. What do you see that I'm missing?
Yeah. Well, it's not just property, right? It's P&C generally, but my client base is commercial real estate owners and developers. So, and some home builders. I don't know. Some people stick them in the commercial real estate development vertical and others don't, but it's a liability and property play, right? And over the past several years, the property market has just been so hard that property was the number one topic for everyone, especially those who are operational, you know, who are operators of assets that are fixed as opposed to developers. Although builder's risk was pretty tough for a while there too, and still is in certain areas, but the premiums were just going up so much, and we got hit with this kind of perfect storm with inflation, supply chain issues, cost to rebuild going up. So then your replacement values are up, and the rates were going up 15, 20, sometimes 30%. So in a year, certain people were seeing 50%, 100% property insurance increases, and they couldn't figure out why. And it kind of came out of nowhere. Well, it didn't. There were leading indicators for us in the industry. And I think like best in class brokers were having those conversations with their clients prior to 2018, 2019, kind of like, hey, the market is shifting. We're starting to see it harden. They probably didn't know that all of those other things were going to hit at the same time too, right? Um, it was where people had the most pain. And so they were willing to listen. I mean, I joke all the time, like up until a year or two ago, like I don't remember ever being invited to like speak on a podcast or speak at a conference and part of it is the social media presence, but part of it is also like people want to talk about insurance more than they ever did before because now it's a real number, especially in that commercial real estate space that I play in, where it may have been, your risk manager or someone else handling it before. Now, oftentimes you have C-suite eyes on it because now it's your fastest growing expense line item. Now it's outpacing rent growth. And in the real estate world, if you have one expense line item that's outpacing rent growth, you're not profitable, period. You can't get around that. There's only so many levers you can pull to increase your NOI, right? So you need to either increase your rents, you need to reduce your CapEx, or you need to reduce your OpEx. And when your insurance line item is blowing your OpEx out of the water, there's nothing that you can do to offset that enough and still maintain profitability, right? So people would listen. I mean, any property insurance solution was a topic that people wanted to talk about. And now it's starting to shift. We're coming into a softer property market. Liability will be the next big thing. We're starting to see that already, especially in the multifamily space. So
Well, softer market in commercial, not
commercial,
in personal.
no, different world.
Yeah.
Um,
I think a lot of people get confused about that.
Yeah, no, your homeowner's insurance isn't going down anytime soon. If you own some industrial buildings, some multifamily or whatever, it might. I mean, if you're coastal Florida, high wildfire California, if you have terrible loss history, like those people are still seeing increases. But all other things being equal, if you have a pretty clean portfolio and like pretty good risk controls, we're seeing a lot of people now like 5 to 10% decreases on renewals, which is nice. It's nice to not be the Grim Reaper going into every meeting. That's another reason I'm loving this like consultant role versus the broker role was for those last few years, like it was just brutal every time you would have to deliver a renewal, right? It was just awful.
Yeah, we experience that with auto right now.
Mhm.
Commercial auto is really tough. Okay, interesting. Yeah, you know what? I still see it as, even if, at least on accounts like we deal with. So we
Mhm.
deal with middle market and kind of the smaller national accounts. And property is never a big piece of that. I mean, we do manufacturers, we do restaurants, we do construction, we
Yeah.
do a lot of that. And the property I deal with is maybe one building and personal property, right? Tools and inland marine and stuff like that. Is that why I don't have an appreciation for it?
Yeah, it's a function of the type of accounts that you're working on. So I think it's very specific to the space that I'm in. I'm working with commercial real estate owners, most of whom have 500 million or more in assets, many of whom have a couple billion or more in assets, down to, quarter of a million. In some cases, it makes sense still to work with me, but they have significant portfolios. So that property insurance increasing is a massive problem that they need to work with.
Okay, I need you to prove me wrong here.
Yeah. And these real estate firms typically run pretty lean in terms of employees. So they don't have the work comp issue. It's totally opposite.
Okay, yeah, because that was going to be my question is that, sorry. My assumption, I said this out loud to myself this morning in preparation for this conversation, is that your customer base, this is what I thought. So I'm not saying it as a fact, but my assumption was that your customer base has to be middle market or smaller national accounts, because once a company gets big enough, they're going to have their own risk manager in-house. They're going to have like, hey, I pay this person $150,000 a year, $200,000 a year to manage our risk. Why would we double up on that? It seems like an unnecessary expense for somebody that has those resources in-house. And so does that force you down into the middle market type space where we don't have this role in-house, so we need to hire a consultant? Because really what you're doing, how I see it, and this is where I need you to prove me wrong, is your clients don't know how else to church this up. Your clients don't trust the broker that they are getting the most out of them, or maybe their interests are not aligned, or they're complacent, or just, hey, yep, this is what the carrier gave us, just playing a middleman, and they're not going above and beyond to lower the costs, because hey, if I lower your costs, I lower my commission and stuff like that, right? There are inherent conflicts, one, and two, I saw it as tough for you if somebody was big enough that they had those resources in-house. So explain to me how I'm wrong.
Yeah, a few things.
How?
Not that you're wrong, but just other things to consider here, right?
Thanks, idiot.
I think a lot of people would be absolutely amazed at how many people have 200 million, 300 million, 500 million, $800 million real estate portfolios and don't really have a team, even up to like low billions, either because they just haven't really set up a family office yet, or they have kind of a new family office, but it's not really working smoothly yet, or, they are operators and they are involved in their core business and they're not thinking about, most people were not thinking about insurance until 3 or 4 years ago when all of this shit came crashing down, right? Some do, especially, institutional groups are going to have a dedicated risk manager, risk management team. Mm-hmm. I've been reached out to by one group that's even multiples of that size, which kind of surprised me. A lot of times they need help with their risk management, especially if you've got, let's say, one person who's training 2 other people or whatever. And so their time is, so people hire us, I would say, for one of a few reasons. One is just the price buyer, right? Like, hey, I want to reduce my insurance. And in most cases, we can help with that. But that's kind of like the dummy play, in my opinion, right?
Or size play, right? So I feel like 90% of middle market buyers are that. And then maybe it doesn't necessarily flip, but 30, 70, when you're more sophisticated and you maybe understand the importance of this product versus the cost, you look at it as a tool. You go on offense versus defense.
Right.
I think it's a size play too.
I think what people need to realize about insurance is truly just access to capital at a decreased rate on a contingent basis.
That's exactly what it is.
And so it's not like this big complicated thing. I mean, you can make it that, but really once you have enough scale, you can design your insurance program to be whatever you want, and you're just trading capital. And so
I think you have to look at it longer than a 1-year thing for that to happen.
Which is why I call hey, I want to reduce my premium, the dummy play, because it's like if you're thinking that short-sighted, you're not taking control of the program, which is where there's real opportunity to make a change to your organization with like real strategies, right?
I think I think you're playing in a totally different game.
Right.
The insurance company is playing big data game, and you're playing annual cost game. And so you need to, and like I said, once you get a little bit more sophisticated, not talking poorly about smaller companies, but it's just a fact that once you get more sophisticated and experienced and thinking longer term, you start playing big data. Like, okay, big data, 5-year game plan versus annual. It's just different. You look at it differently, and it's no longer an annual cost of insurance. It's here's how I protect and get access to discounted capital on a contingent basis.
Right. I think I am starting to see a trend. I won't say it's common, but I have seen some what I would call smaller groups now, right? Couple $100 million portfolios or whatever, who are putting together. And I don't know if this is a function of like the leadership is younger now, and so this is more of a focus, or if it's a function of the market or what, but they are kind of coming out of the gates more sophisticated because they are realizing that their institutional, operators that they need to be competing against for this insurance capacity. And so I've actually been surprised lately at a couple of groups that I've worked with who, are not that large, maybe, $250,000 to $500,000 or $250 million to $500 million in assets under management, but they have extremely detailed SOVs, right? Everything is clean down to like the type of roof shingle, the year everything was updated, all of this information that you would expect from like a large institutional firm to put into their submissions. But now I am seeing some smaller firms who have started to do that as well.
So SOV is statement of values.
Statement of values.
Bane of my existence.
Yeah. And they're only going to get more complicated and more detailed. And to your point, underwriters people seem to forget that like these are multi-billion-dollar companies who have access to more data than you can imagine. I mean, they can see in your backyard right now if they want to. They have real-time satellite imaging, right? Like they can look in the window right now if they want. You're not getting anything over on them by like lying about the age of your roof or, you know what I mean? The year that you updated your wiring. Like they have access to 15 different portals where they can pull all of the real estate data and every work order that's been done, and they can see if you've updated your wiring or not.
Or you're just buying something that they're not going to pay out on anyways because you lied on the application. So like you're buying something for no reason. It's either to check a box or, you're not getting value out of this other than maybe qualifying for that job that you put a bid on or whatever, or maybe a loan that you needed. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. How much is property versus the other lines of insurance that you deal with? And so just to be clear,
yeah,
you as a consultant, risk management consultant, will come in and run the process, the renewal process?
It depends. So,
or just looking for, are you the Doge of
little bit,
insurance?
Yeah. That is kind of what it's like. So we work with our clients on one of two bases, and I call this an owner's rep because I hate the word bases, two more than one basis. One being a transactional basis and one being an annual basis. And so some people will hire us and they'll just come in and say, hey, we just need someone to run this RFP for us. I want you to introduce us to the brokers. Because the other thing that we do is I'm meeting with nationwide from the top 10 or so insurance brokerages, the people who lead their real estate teams, I'm talking to on a regular basis, and I'm aggregating data from them. So I know what their renewals look like, what kind of rates they've been getting, what carriers they're writing with, et cetera. And so if someone comes to me and says, hey, this is what I hear most often, actually, other than complaining about rates. We just don't know if our broker's doing a good job or not. We think they might be, but because of the way the industry is set up, which is, I'm sure, a complaint that you get all the time too, right? You can't really send multiple brokers out to market because of the blah, blah, blah.
A carrier will only provide a quote to one broker.
So we'd love to do an RFP, but we don't even know what questions to ask to validate that we're working with a good broker or not. So that's worth paying someone X fee to just run that RFP. Plus, maybe they don't have the manpower to do it. They don't want to dedicate the resources to it, whatever. They're just going to pay me to do it instead. Fine. Another thing's a program audit. This is becoming more and more common because LPs are pushing for it. Hey, I have invested my money into this deal. You've had the same insurance broker for 20 years. Why is it going up 30% every year? Are we sure this is still a good deal? No, we need a third party.
Is limited partner.
Right.
We need
a third party to come in and do an audit on this. lenders are starting to push for it more and more too. And I think that will become more and more common. I think one of the biggest exposures in the insurance and commercial real estate space that is not talked about enough is the balance sheet risk that exists between lenders who think they have compliant insurance and what they actually have. I would say actual compliance is probably between 20 and 30%, but somehow things are slipping through the cracks at a kind of alarming rate. So yeah, or people hire us on an annual basis where we do all of those things, as well as like an insurance 101 training where I train their property management staff on how to ask for certificates, how to review the certificates, what are you doing in your lender agreements? What are you doing in your your contracts with your tenants? What do your lease agreements look like? What do your vendor agreements look like? And we kind of go through all of those things. And yes, we manage the renewal process, which, I hate to say this, but sometimes, there's a very low barrier to entry to be an insurance broker. And the quality of insurance brokers goes from A+ all the way on down. And so what I've realized, a lot of brokers just really aren't trying to get a better renewal. And literally us just being there, it's like, oh, we found this 10%. Because now you have someone who's pushing instead of the client who, when you told them that it was a 7% increase, they trusted you, and then they're like, hey, I hired a consultant. And it's like, oh, we just found 15% here for you. Now it's a 8% decrease. Keep us around because the broker doesn't want to get fired.
Probably pays for itself, pays for your fee.
We haven't had I've had one situation where I charged a fee and on a net basis, the client will end up paying a lot more after having worked with us. But that was because their broker had, I don't even want to talk about it actually, but it was a home builder whose broker had rated them as a cabinet maker. So they truly had no coverage. And so we had to come in and basically say, we're absolutely not going to save you money. You're going to pay a lot more money if you want to
more expensive getting it right.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you have one claim right now, it's not going to get covered and your business is at risk, right? So it's important to get it right.
So I'm going to look at this from an entrepreneur point of view.
Yeah.
I guess not people out there that want to start a business or that are they're just entrepreneurs in general. The problem that the
opportunity.
The thing I'm not a fan of your business model, and maybe just food for thought, is that you will always need new sales. The recurring revenue aspect. So if you being a broker, that average customer lifespan is like 10 years. And so you get that recurring revenue for 10 years with what you're doing. I mean, again, I might be wrong and I want to have that dialogue back and forth, but you always need new sales. So even if you're 70 years old, you can't rely on a lot of the work that you've done to continue to bring revenue in. It's, hey, I still need to cold call. I still need to post social media. I still need to, lead, capture, nurture, generate, all of that, right?
The degree to which we get involved in our client's core business when we get hired on an annual basis, it would be very difficult for someone to work with us for a year and not work with us in year 2.
Okay, so, that's good.
I mean, it's difficult. I don't have numbers yet because we haven't gotten through a full annual cycle yet, right? I've had, but I imagine the transactional deals totally different, right? Those I kind of just see as free money. That's not recurring revenue. It comes in, it's great. It's 20 grand here, it's 30 grand here, it's 50 grand here. I'll take it all day long. But to your point about revenue quality earlier, yes, those annual deals that are most likely going to be renewed are much different revenue quality than those transactional deals, right? Those transactional deals are so freaking easy. I mean,
labor intensive is the recurring revenue. So if you get somebody that signs a year deal with you, a year contract, is it like a full-time job doing that? And then you have the next thing you would need to address is scale, right? So if I'm signing annual deals, like I can only sign 3 of these things and not hire another person that would totally take away the second half of the second deal and the third deal revenue to pay for this other person, right?
I mean, that's the point we're at now, right? Where I think it'll be for sure 1, maybe 2 hires this year. And it's just finding the right people. Yeah, because there's no way that I could maintain. I could, but to your point, yes, I've already had to start turning away some clients and I will continue to have to turn away more. And that's just not.
Just to preserve the quality of
work. You can't do it all.
Interesting. Okay. Well, when you get to that point, let's have a conversation.
I will call you about that. Yeah.
There are personnel hiring things that at least you should consider.
Okay.
Not one way is better than the other, but once you start bringing on employees, the game changes.
It's my biggest fear right now.
Well,
Yeah.
it changes on a couple different levels. And, any entrepreneur watching this is going to understand where I'm coming from. But just something as simple as payroll tax, somebody costs you $70,000, they really cost you 95.
Mhm.
You have employee benefits, you have 401k, you have, payroll tax, you have to deal with,
Work
family
comp.
issues, workers' comp, and there are more efficient ways to doing things than maybe just a traditional W-2 full-time
Mhm.
employee, especially in the beginning, because if you look to hire one person, you're not required to have employee benefits, medical benefits with one employee. Well, what kind of employee are you going to be
Right.
attracting if you don't offer it? Right. So it's like a catch 22, from 0 to 10 employees. It's kind of a catch 22. So there are efficient ways to do it. So you need to forecast a little bit how long until I get to this point where employee benefits, 401k, all of this other compensation stuff really makes sense. So anyways, that's kind of what we do. So we should definitely have a conversation when you get to that point, just so I can provide some food for thought. And as a broker, my job is to lay out options. It's your job to make decisions.
There you go. Yeah. No, I need to, I mean, ultimately, the more I can take myself out of the business, the more valuable it is anyways, right? So I need to
Well, you're a long way from
I
that.
need to bring
You're a
more people.
long way
No,
from
but I
that.
mean, we're hitting 7 figures much faster than I expected, and there's no reason to believe that it's not just continuing to grow. And so,
Yes.
yeah, to your point, yeah, I mean, you can't
But I do like that you're at
be the
seven.
one man shop forever.
Yeah, I do like that you're on pace for that, and you don't have any employees.
I do too. That was a goal.
That's awesome.
That was a goal.
That's awesome.
It was just much easier goal to hit than I thought it would be.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe you're much more productive than an employee would be. So maybe that number gets cut in half. The net, your margins get cut in half once you start hiring people. But that'll be true in any business that you do. You're going to be more productive than anybody else in your business, period. That will never change. All right. Interesting. So let's talk about whenever you go in and meet with somebody, give me a strategy. Give me something behind the scenes, behind the curtain type of strategy that you look for. I can give you an example why you think of it. So one thing that we do, and I don't mind giving away strategy because execution is a totally different conversation that 99% of people out there are not going to do. So one strategy that we implement is we call it staggering commissions. So when say you pay $1 million for workers' comp a year, 10% of that goes to the broker. So that's $100,000, right? But what we will do is that $1 million policy, we will remove our commission. So the policy is now 900,000, and we will have the employer pay us directly our $100,000. They're still out of pocket $1 million, but next year, when we go out to market, all that is required, it's not even required, but all people ask is, what is the expiring premium? So now instead of me saying $1 million, I'll say 900,000. Now they assume that my commission is built in there, and I'd let them assume it. I would never lie if they asked me, but now 900,000 is expiring. And so they will quote it at, try to beat the price at 850. And that includes our commission. So that next year, our commission's built in. Now, the year after that, we remove our commission again. And so it's kind of a stair step down to reduce premium. So that's one strategy that you can do. Is there anything like that in your space? So when you go in, like, what are the first things that you look for? I'm sure that you've seen several recurring themes that brokers are doing or are not doing.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a 5 hour long discussion, right? I always tell people, like, if you're not sure, just send me your SOV and your rates, and I can tell you in 5 minutes if it makes sense to hire us or not, right? Um, because yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different things that you can do. A lot of it is just making sure that the client is with the right broker, like getting that Goldilocks fit where they have the broker that has the right resources for them, but they're also going to garner enough attention to get access to those resources, right? Because a lot of people think, like, especially when you're scaling, they're working with like this hometown guy, or they've, started to expand into different markets, and now they've got like 4 hometown guys in different hometowns, right? And it's like you get to a certain scale where you kind of need to aggregate everything with one broker. And then what broker do you go to? And they're like, oh, well, we'll go to Marsh because they're the biggest broker. And it's like, maybe that's the right fit for you. But just because, a Marsh or an Aon has access to all of these resources, it also matters what team you're working with. And you
Right.
want to know, like, in that team's revenue structure, where do you fall? Because you don't want to be the biggest client that they have, and you don't want to be the smallest client that they have. Because if you're the smallest client, you're not going to get the attention. If you're the biggest client, you're probably not working with the right team. You need to work with someone who has more expertise, right? So you need to like drill. And it's amazing to me how many really, really successful people do not want to have these conversations with their insurance broker. What does your book of business look like? What's your spread of revenue? Who are your other clients? The firing. I mean, I made a joke at one point, but I truly believe someone could make a business just out of firing people's insurance brokers for them. I guarantee you there have been situations where I said, hey, pay me $5,000 and I'll go fire your broker for you. Someone would have paid it just to have that done.
Yeah.
Like, people do not like having these conversations, which amazes me. So I think the first thing is just seeing, like, is that the right relationship? I've seen some horrible stuff too. Brokers charging 15% commission on the front end and 15% on the back,
Double
feeing it
dipping.
up on the back
Yeah.
end. Clients don't know, and it's your brother-in-law and it's this and that. And
Oh, yeah.
he's like been stealing all these millions of dollars from you through your insurance policies over the last several years. And it's like, well, that's a fun conversation to be your client with, but those things do happen. So like looking at the broker's, fee structure is one thing, making sure that the broker has the right resources. Maybe it's even a broker with a large brokerage, but they've been acquired or whatever, and they may not even know what resources they have access to within the larger broker network. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, because we're meeting with all those large brokerages regularly, we're like, hey, you did this for another client though, like ran this kind of report. Why didn't you do this here? And maybe they don't know who to call internally to get it done, but we can help facilitate that, right? So things like that. I mean, a lot of insurance, this is just kind of knowing the right people and what to look for. In the larger property space too, I mean, a lot more people are looking at alternative risk solutions, right? Captives, or even if you're not ready to go fully captive, a lot of people in the multifamily space are doing renter's insurance captives, security deposit captives, kind of dip their feet wet into that alternative risk transfer space.
Mm-hmm.
Lenders are starting to work with operators a little bit more so that they can get a little bit more creative in the ways that they structure their insurance programs. Certainly we're seeing a lot of people allow for, higher retentions as long as the balance sheet will support it. And a lot of people are going that route. So, but it's also, it's looking at the business. It's, hey, if you're getting hit with hurricanes every year, at what point do you just start using metal roofs? If you can, if the local code will let you, right? Or do you want to keep having an insurance claim every year, every other year? Like, does that make sense? So it's, insurance is kind of part of this larger ecosystem. It's never its own thing, right? It's not an island.
So do you look for any of these things? And I ask because this is maybe what's more important to me as a consumer and being an entrepreneur. I don't know, just in my experience, I see value in other things other than access, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I wrote down: influence versus access.
Mm-hmm.
Marsh may have access to every carrier in the entire world, but my sister is the underwriter at this.
Right.
So that's the difference between, Marsh can get a quote from her. I have Thanksgiving with her.
1,000%.
Entrepreneur versus corporation. Somebody that actually gives a shit about doing a good job versus somebody that is fishing for a promotion and is no longer going to be on your team in 12 months or 15 months from now. Substance versus glossy. Marsh and Aon will always have prettier things to lay in front of you. Their suits will always be more expensive. But some of these other things add up to substance, where it's just very glossy in access.
Mm-hmm.
And then street fighter versus people pleaser. I would have somebody that is not a yes person in a meeting. I want somebody that pushes back on me, that contradicts something that I'm saying, like, oh, insurance companies, this isn't this. Well, I appreciate that. I see where you come from, but you're wrong. This is
Right.
The math is the math, and we need to figure out a way to play the math. I can help you with that, but your stance that these are just idiots doing the wrong thing or criminal, that's not the case. And it's not going to get you anywhere having that. If somebody said that to me in a meeting, like, fuck, I want you.
Yeah.
Right? Not somebody that's like, yeah, I agree. Yeah, these people are criminal. Oh,
Yeah.
so how much of it, is that the kind of deep dive and attention to detail that you're doing? Or, have you
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it too is like almost 20 years of network building in this space,
For sure.
right? So it's kind of, I know who to call. And then once you move to this role and now you're calling on your prior competitors, essentially, right? But then they're introducing you to other people within their organization because now they want to work with you.
Yeah.
So it's become this interesting thing where the prior competitor for me is now a referral source because brokers are bringing me in on deals and I'm bringing brokers in on deals, never at the detriment of my client. I'm never going to I don't pay the broker, just to be clear. Client only pays me. Broker and client compensation is a whole separate issue. I can help them negotiate it, but I'm never going to get involved in that situation. Um, Now, some brokers will, as part of like an RFP process, say, hey, we'll cover ATW's fee for a year or two. It's kind of a differentiator between them and their competition. That's fine. But they're still going to pay the client. The client's going to pay me, just so there's never any question about, our incentive alignment. But yeah, I mean, I think in our space too, and I don't know if you see this much in the work comp world, there'll be a lot of like little programs that pop up, like in the property space, you have EOS now and those things. And
Mhm.
so it amazes me how many people don't pay attention to like, EOS is owned by Arthur Gallagher. So if you're going to try to place something with EOS, why would you not place it through a Gallagher team? Because they're going to have access to that program that any other broker is not going to necessarily have, right? You're going to get a better deal there.
That's good. Yeah, that attention to detail is, and I think out of the box detail is um, what wins clients over. I have this conversation with attorneys all the time, or regarding attorneys. So we'll be talking to a client and they'll have a workers' comp claim, and the applicant attorney that's representing the injured worker is, I don't know, whatever, Smith and Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of putting that aside and looking at attorneys and saying, well, Black and Rose is the best attorney firm traditionally in workers' comp to settle something. But what we do is like, all right, their attorney is Smith and Brown. Let me make a couple of phone calls. And we call the attorney firms and say, hey, do you know anybody over at Smith and Brown,
Mm-hmm.
like on texting terms that you can get shit done? And that's who's chosen.
Right.
Rather than like making two different decisions. It's a comprehensive type of issue. And like we take that approach with placing policies, we do it with claims, we do it with everything, that out of the box thinking that doesn't take much more effort, honestly. It's just different style of thinking. And I think if as a consultant, that's what I would want to hear, tell me something I don't know. And it doesn't have to be something out of a book. Tell me something I don't know about, this attorney I'm having issues with. Like, what is your experience in the space dealing with all these people? You should have some sort of insider information that I do not have as a construction company or a developer. Like, I focus on developing stuff. This is your world. Tell me
Yeah.
something that I don't know. So anyway, that's the approach that we take. Has been really effective. And I deal with consultants all the time that come in and say, well, you should be with Marsh or you should be with Aon. And like, there's zero substance behind it. Like, why?
Well, and most of them, okay, here's the reality about most insurance consulting firms and why what we do is so different, right? Is like they don't know their client's core business and they don't know insurance. So it's like, what are you actually doing? Right? A lot of them are just general business consultants who have this insurance arm and they've hired people who like have never done
That's where
insurance
they
in their
put their
life.
interns.
Right. Literally. Um, and so and they're charging huge contract fees and they're not doing anything beneficial. And then on the back end, they're giving the business to whichever broker gives them the biggest kickback. I mean, that's kind of the most common, right? That's why we bill ourselves as an owner's rep versus a consultant, because we're truly representing the owner through the process. Like we're not,
I called you a
yeah,
consultant,
no, you're fine.
owner's rep.
It really is like it's kind of an untapped space in the market. I think there's a lot of crossover between what we do and what an insurance consultant would do, but it's certainly different. Well, and we limit our clientele to commercial real estate owners and developers intentionally, because we understand that core business. I mean, we've done some work with private equity firms and things who just want you to, look at a target's insurance and sign off on it or whatever. That's a different kind of deal.
So, yeah, that was the last question I was going to ask you. Do you deal with funds?
Real estate funds?
Yeah. A lot of them? Or
Yeah. I mean,
like, would that be in your customer?
most of our clients, yeah, are going to have funds. Yeah.
Okay. So, I might be able to help you out and introduce you to a lot of people. We're actually part of a group. As a matter of fact, I would recommend that you join. So we're part of this group, and it's over 400 funds. Over half of them are real estate. So, 60 or 70% are real estate funds, but nobody there does insurance.
Yeah.
And so it's been great for us because they all need life insurance, which we own the life insurance agency. They all need work comp. They all need general liability, and then property. I don't want anything to do with it. I'll send you some stuff on it, but that would be extremely helpful to you, I think, and maybe your primary source of leads.
Yeah.
Um, but all right, so if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you? Um,
Yeah.
what's the
So
easiest way to get a
you
hold of
can
you?
check out agwadvisors.com or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, Skylar Romines. I think my handle's the same, Skylar Romines. So
Okay, I'll put it in the description. Any advice that you would give people that want to start a business? I know you're almost a year in. Any hard lessons that you've learned that maybe you would advise people to avoid?
I hate to say this, but everything has been like relatively easy so far, at least for me. Like it's not without challenges, but we haven't had any major hiccups where it was like, this is earth shattering, right? No, I mean, just be in the right mind space, be in the right headspace for shit to hit the fan and you're going to have to clean it up, right? I mean, that's the bottom line is if you are operating from a place where you're able to, deal with a certain level of risk and solve a certain number of problems, you're going to be okay as, assuming that you have a real business there and there's potential to be profitable. You're just going to have, I mean, there's no like roadmap, but that's kind of what's fun about it.
I'm excited for you. I'm rooting for you. I hope you do really well. You're already doing well, but I hope that trajectory continues. I'm
Thank
sure it
you.
will. You have the energy and the figured out about you that, like I said, it's the main ingredient for any sort of success. And so I know it's a lot to take that risk, but I'm rooting for you, and I'm sure you're going to crush it.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.